go ahead and start by doing a quick introduction there. So we're live here, folks, and I'm just going to let these fine gentlemen give themselves a quick introduction while I send out the links to the to this very important live stream, and I'll get back to you shortly thereafter. So go right ahead there, John.
I'm Jon Forward. I'm a amateur comedian in New Brunswick, former public school teacher / indoctrinator. I saw this this post and was interested in getting in on it. I actually just bought and read this like last week, so it was meant to be that I'm here. So hopefully, I can take some of the seriousness out of this, because who cares? This is just a silly topic we're talking about.
Right. Okay, go ahead, Ryan. You're next there, buddy. You there, Ryan?
Hey, yeah, sorry, I got a bit of latency here. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, my name's Ryan Penner. I just got a new position with
Hello?
And sorry about that. Like I said, a little bit of latency I'm just trying to deal with here. New position with the Western Standard Online, and just trying to help out with the liberty movement in any way I can. That's about it. Nothing too complex about me. I'm just a simple guy.
Right on. Awesome. Thanks for the intro. Go ahead there, John.
Awesome. My name is John Hicks. I live in the Northwest Territories, way up north. Used to be from Ontario, and I'm glad the hell I live here now. I am a semi-professional first responder. I do fire, EMS, search and rescue on top of my day job, which I won't get into. Other than that, I'm here to just try to debunk this bullshit, because it's bullshit.
Right on.
We'll start there.
That's a pretty good way to start right there. So let me just say first and foremost, before we get right into this stuff, I'm going to be personally, for this particular one, because this is going to be the first one that we're kind of dipping our toes in the water, and I don't know if you gentlemen are familiar with Lysander Spooner, but for this particular first part, my side of things, I'm going to be referencing No Treason. It's a book by Lysander Spooner, and some of the quotes and some of the aspects of what actually Lysander Spooner in terms of pushing back. Now, one thing that I've understood as a libertarian, so with the 4 questions, now I attribute even my own internal thinking and dialogue in terms of figuring this stuff out, these concepts of what the government, all this stuff. I attribute a lot of my thoughts to a lot of people, obviously in the past. You got Aristotle and all of those, but even in the present, I got a lot of respect for people like Larkin Rose, who too took me from this realm of minarchism, limited government libertarianism, to just basically put it to me front and center that no, there's no such thing as legitimate government, and I can actually prove it to you. Now, I kind of, being me, I'm one of those people that I like to make things really efficient. That's just kind of who I am. So I kind of went with what I heard him say, and I created my own little thing called the 4-question quest for freedom, and it's just basically just 4 questions. Now, it deals with the moral implications of government and how you can't morally universalize that government is legit. You can't. Using moral standards or ethical standards, you cannot. It's impossible to do so. And that, I think it's pretty airtight. It's pretty much locked up in terms of my opinion, in terms of how well that's done in terms of the 4 question. Because you personally, if you don't have a so-called right to steal from your neighbor or to control what your neighbor does, it's really impossible to delegate something that you don't have, a right that you don't have, to someone else, right? So if I don't have no way or means of possessing something, there's no way I can give it to someone else. So that, like I say, that's the moral implications. The beautiful thing about what Lysander Spooner brings to the table, or the equation, when you're talking about governments or the legitimacy of government or the social contract, is he brings the legal case. So people try to suggest, and they use the Constitution, right? They use all kinds of different legalese and past precedent or standards set about by whether you talk about the Supreme Court. What Lysander Spooner does is he goes completely, starts the entire conversation not just from first principles, but from using law, justice, and legality, and the consistent application of such against proponents of statism or the legitimacy of government. And that's one thing, like I say, and it's uncomfortable. I'm just going to warn anyone right now that's going to watch this show for any amount of time. If you're a statist in any way, if you're a believer, I hate to say it, but you're going to have some very shocking information presented to you, right? And I know it's tough stuff to deal with, folks, but truth has to matter, right? Objective reality has to supersede our constant indulgence into the mystic realm. I mean, those are great, right? In your own personal life, you can pretend you're a unicorn all day long if you want. I don't care personally. But when it comes to using force, which is what government is at the end of the day, it is a monopoly of force of violence in any particular geographical area, is when you're talking about using preemptive force, this is something that we have to take serious, and we got to truly be honest and consistent in our logic and our reasoning when we're talking about our social and economic transactions or interactions. So that's like I said, that's just me kind of throwing out already where we're going to be going to in this first of this series that I expect to be going on for a little while, because like I say, a lot of people need to learn a lot of important things that, trust me, the people that have educated you, or as John said early on, indoctrinated you, yeah, they didn't do that. Now, some of them might have done it just because of apathy or ignorance themselves, but some of them may never want to inform you properly because it goes against, what they want out of life, right? So this is what we got to keep in mind. This is the kind of thing, that's the kind of information we're going to be talking about. And I'll just hand it off to either one of you gentlemen. So whoever just wants to step up now and kind of, maybe push back against what I'm saying, offer your own, information or your perspective on the pretense of the social contract.
I just think this is a tough pill for people to swallow, just because they've grown up in it, and most people have gone through 12 years of public school, that whether it's explicit or not, or you can argue about whether it's on purpose or not, but really you're growing up in a situation, and you learn in school that, every problem that's ever been solved has either been solved by a soldier or a politician. You don't learn about anything else. So just the idea, it's tough for us libertarians or anarchists such as myself to even have a starting point for this conversation with most people, because we're approaching it through like morality or logic, and that's just, there isn't any moral or logical argument for the other side. It's just, it all boils down to, it's just the way it is, which is the social contract is just a different way to say that's just the way it is.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one for sure.
And it's all just, even if, everybody would consent to this if we asked, well, then why don't we ask?
Right.
Yeah. I think we kind of jumped the gun a little bit. I think we need to come to a consensus as to what public perception of the social contract is, what the generally accepted definition of it is. I did write down what I believe that definition is. So where are we? So I think basically it's a general abstract concept that has to do with how we conduct ourselves with each other generally. In what I wrote down, I kind of included our responsibilities to Mother Earth as well. I'm not a greener by any means, but we do have our responsibilities to how we treat the world in our day-to-day. And a lot of people's disregard for that is the root of our problems there. So it just has to do with that respect in dealing with each other in the day-to-day. And if we were to consider the social contract as being legitimate, there's way too many people that kind of point the finger and then display themselves as being virtue signaling themselves as being morally upright individuals while pointing the finger at the shortcomings of others. So that's kind of where I am with it,
Right. Did you say, is there something that you say you particularly wrote down that you wanted to actually reference?
Well, no. I mean, I just wrote some notes down as far as what I considered to be the definition. And like I said, it's an abstract concept, the social contract, right? And
we're definitely going to get into that. But I would just say at the very least, and I think we would all agree on this, is whatever it is, whatever the definition is, and sure, we can have different interpretations or what the social contract, the pretense of it is. But at the very least, I think we would all agree that it has to be universalized and consistent for everyone, right? If there's
absolutely.
if there's any exception, like there's anybody along that paradigm, just like, and I use this in many past examples, and John, I think he's probably heard me, John Hicks has heard me say this before. Like if we were sitting down to play a board game, right? We're not going to say, okay, we all have to function under this rules, but this guy gets to function under a completely different set of rules, right? Because we'd realize if those rules gave someone else an advantage, an automatic advantage over the rest of us, we'd be like, okay, the game's rigged, I'm not playing. Simple as that, right? I think that's the main thing, what we're trying to get to with the social contract. We'll definitely talk about whether there's legitimacy to it, but we'll also delve into the thought processes or the thought experiment of, let's say we could even construct or conjure up a genuine, social contract. How would that come about? How would it exist? And is it possible to allow that to take place when some people in society get to overrule or override or be exceptions to the rules the rest of us in society have to adhere to? So I think those are the big picture questions. I think is universality. It has to be universal. And is there even any way where we can get to the point where there is such thing as a genuine social contract? Now, I think, we'll get to this, and like we've got lots of time to expand on this. But that's something that is possible. There is potential for it, but it can't function under the current paradigm or the way it's particularly structured currently, I would suggest. Anyways, any further thoughts on that, John Hicks?
Yeah, so I like where Randall's going, but the definition itself doesn't matter so much to me. It's the ideas behind the idea.
Right.
So let's start off with history is important, right? Understanding where things come from. Yep. So where did the social contract originate?
That's a good question. I can't even answer that. Where did the social contract originate?
Well, they like to talk about, they act as if things were just in chaos and everybody was like, oh, won't somebody please help us? Let's sign up.
Interesting.
There's a Thomas Hobbes quote that I came across that just said that, before a social contract, the lives of individuals were solitary, poor, nasty, and short.
Oh, the
so you're creating this awful situation that existed before that could only be fixed by the social contract.
It almost sounds like COVID. So here's my point. Like if we go to Wikipedia and pull up social contract, they talk about Jean-Jacques Rousseau's Contract of Social, 1762. So we have to ask ourselves, what the fuck was going on in 1762? That would cause him to have this idea to write this book. So in 1766, the U.S. was born, right? So we're in that era of in Europe. If for any of us that have read the How Nations Fail, right? Combine that with Conceived in Liberty, we get a really good picture of the fuckery that was going on at the time in different countries, right? What people were trying to do. So Britain was at the forefront of the Industrial Revolution because their legislature had an early grasp on rulemaking and stuff and pulling it away from the monarchy. What countries fell behind? It was Spain and France largely. And where did Rousseau come from? Well, he was a French guy, right? So in my mind, what he's done is he's just wrote a book that says, hey, let's take ourselves from feudalism, because feudalism sucks. These people keep rolling in and burning shit and stabbing people and raping people. Let's go to a system where we can vote for this stuff instead. And it won't be feudal anymore, but it'll be like this super feudal system where we'll get to vote against other people to do the same shit that these people are doing to us now. It's just we get to control who to fuck over. And if you take a look at how the U.S. was started, well, Conceived in Liberty is a whole history of you can screw these Indians, but not those Indians, trade with those ones, but not these guys. And then everyone fucks off from that and creates something individual by themselves with none of that. And there you go. They prosper.
Yeah, well, and it's a lot of also just, well, other things are worse than this. So even if you point out something that's wrong with the current situation, it's like, at least we're not that. And like in No Treason, there's a really powerful quote that's in a footnote, which doesn't usually happen, but this is a good go-to when I'm fighting with somebody on Facebook. When they say, well, democracy is better than whatever, and he's got a quote in a footnote, suppose it is the best government on earth. Does that prove its own goodness or only the badness of all other governments?
Exactly. The lesser of evils.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's just the assumption that everything sucked before and this is the best we can do. And talking about the definition of what the social contract is, the power of it is that it is very loose and vague. Because if you did hammer it down and it was like, okay, you people are agreeing to do X in exchange for Y, as soon as you put that down in black and white, then somebody's like, where the fuck is my Y? I'm not going to do X now. But that doesn't happen. The other side of this contract doesn't ever have to deliver the goods.
Well, let me just throw the idea, and one of you guys, whichever, it doesn't matter to me, or all of you can answer, take a stab at answering this one. Even the people that are believers in the pretense of the social contract, I mean, just using the term contract automatically implies that you sign something, right? And even if you take that out of the equation, what contract that anyone would ever sign up to, would you leave it open where, because obviously that's the thing in democracy. It's not like the contract, it's not like legislation. Acts of legislation, the laws, the edicts, or the mandates are all the same. Even if you go back in Canada's short history, right, 1867, every time a new politician or group of politicians form government, well, they come in and they enact new legislation. So even the people that are believers of the social contract, just superficially off the top, just because of some of the other people around them that have told us such, I always wondered, why wouldn't you at least question, well, if you supposedly, if there's a suggestion that you signed up to a social contract, well, every few years that contract gets rewritten. You should have to be called in to re-sign up for that stuff, right? And that's the thing. And then, of course, we can get into the voting and the taxes, because Lysander Spooner, once again, deals with the pretense that when people try to bring the argument, well, you vote for it, right, kind of deal. But anyways, just off the top of your head, what do you guys suggest when people bring up the social contract in terms of the fact that there's a new contract written every few years?
Yeah. So that's a really interesting point, Bennett, that you bring up, and I've been kind of going on about this a lot. Is people are like, oh, you have to uphold the Charter of Rights. You have to uphold, and it's like, yeah, if you're going to have a Charter of Rights, it's nice to uphold. But what people need to understand is that Charter of Rights isn't worth the piece of paper it's written on. When the first line of it says everything that is given in this document is subject to, what do they call it, fundamental rights of justice or something fucking vague like that, right? So I had a screen done up here. There's your original social contract right there. Right? Who the fuck would sign that? And it goes even beyond that. Like, you talk about laws, but at least our laws are written down. Right. Yeah. So we do get the chance to debate those and to talk about those. But the point I want to bring up in relation to this, and it kind of goes where you were going, was the concept of the living, breathing Constitution. Right. Every country in this world except one has a living, breathing Constitution. And it's that idea of, oh, you have rights and freedoms, except unless by majority vote we decide otherwise. Right. Until you go read the U.S. Constitution, and it was written like that for a fucking reason. Because
or like if we have a really good reason to violate your right.
Well, we can get away from the Constitution too, like they have for the last 200 and something.
Oh, there's just invisible asterisks in there. Like, well, you're allowed to have free movement between the provinces, like, unless we don't wanna.
Yeah. Well, that's the part that I was trying to get to, is whether you're talking about even the U.S. Constitution, and I'll admit and agree with John here, that it's, in terms of a foundational document at its time, and especially back in the 1700s, right? I mean, it was an amazing, piece. And it was something that was, at that particular time, I would imagine, was profoundly outside of anything that in size or scope in terms of how people acknowledge, their inherent or inalienable rights. Because prior to that, most people didn't even understand that their rights came as by sheer fact of being born a free human being. Most people believed that, it was either God or the state, right, or the pharaoh, right, that basically instilled the rights or offered them, which, if someone's given it to you, it's a privilege. It's not a right. But the sheer fact that no matter if you're talking about the U.S. Constitution, or any other of these social contracts, whether you're talking about Canada's democracy under the parliamentary system, every one of them, the fact that, and John brought it up with the Charter of Rights, the fact that there's a notwithstanding clause where here's all your rights, but I got this little disclaimer here that I've left in here that I can take them away anytime I just deem fit. Well, once again, if there's anything written within the contract that suggests that you have rights that are supposed to be inalienable, inherent, right, and not granted to you or afforded you by government, but just by sheer fact that you were born a free human being. But if there's a disclaimer anywhere in there that says, but I can overrule them and take them away anytime I see fit, well, that's not a right. That's a privilege, right? So let's at least clarify the language and be honest about things here. We're afforded and granted, based on the way the current system is set up, is a bunch of privileges that our overlords, our political masters, can somehow take away at any time they deem or see fit. And we've understood this definitely, with the massive lockdowns and the restrictions and impositions on our personal freedoms and liberties, both social and economic, under the COVID-19 breakout, right? So, or outbreak. So that there is just, that alone tells you if there's a contract where one of the signees or the executor of the actual contract has a clause in there that says that I'm not going to be able to, you can't hold me to account on my side of the contract. I'm not responsible. I'm not accountable in any way, and I can rewrite the rules anytime. No human being that's sensible or sane would ever agree to sign in any contract, right? Well, that's a big thing that I think is something that most people need to understand is the illegitimacy comes by the fact that it's not even all the participants aren't even held to the proper standards that they suggest are contained within the so-called social contract.
Yeah,
and then we thank them when they give us our rights back after they've taken them.
Classic example of that is legalization of marijuana, an appeal to authority, right? You should just be able to do whatever the heck you want with your own body, but we had to. I mean, the government was elected on that, like solely, specifically, the youth of Canada elected the Trudeau Liberals based on that appeal to authority that they campaigned on, and it's preposterous in my opinion, really. Absolutely.
Thanks for the permission slip to get high, Justin.
Absolutely.
And twice as many laws to allow that freedom.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
The marijuana thing was why I definitely, when it was starting to, because I've partaked over the course of my life, and that was something that I definitely understood, very early on, is this whole pretense of legalization. I knew what was coming, before, and not because I'm some oracle or have this amazing capacity, right? It's just a simple thing. It's just you use just pure logic, what the state represents, and the fact that they're trying to legalize it rather than decriminalize it. Right, which to remove any impositions in terms of punitive actions or measures against people who are partaking, distributing, or cultivating these products. The minute you create it under the legalization, well, that's just to say that the state wants to take over the industry, right? That's all it meant to me. And I tried to explain that to a lot of people, and even some of the cohorts from, I have two sons that are in there. They're millennials. They're like 29 and 25. And I tried to explain them so they could help, expand on that kind of knowledge to their peers. But once again, their peers have all gone through the indoctrination process, like most of us, right? And haven't had the ample time or opportunity, because they're still young yet, to break through some of these paradigms and some of these concepts and actually think about them critically. That's the major issue. Is most people these days are so seemingly inundated and overwhelmed with so much. I don't think most people even have the ample time or opportunity to actually even sit down and think critically about these issues, because I think that is the biggest, most important thing. I don't think that people are too stupid or inept to understand these concepts. I mean, it's not like you or I, or, we aren't exceptional people by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, we might have some attributes that might place us a little bit superior to others in some way. That might be a possibility, but I don't believe that that's even a necessity to get people to understand, because these are very, very simple concepts. What it is, though, those who are proponents of the state, with their use of legalese and these goddamn contradictory messages, or these terms that they use that sound benevolent or altruistic, which at the end of the day, once you delve into them, you find out that they're actually the exact opposite of what they purport to espouse or promote. That's the thing. But most people, they just take, just like when you were talking about articles, most people just read that headline, right? Too much work. Effort, or it's going to take too much of my time and my day, and I got to go out and do this, that, and this, right?
If you contract out all of your thinking for yourself, then those muscles atrophy just like anything else.
Exactly.
Yeah. Most of the articles that are shared on social media these days, you go to click on them and they're behind paywall anyway. It's like, thanks for the headline that confirms your bias, right?
Yeah, and whenever somebody shares one of those, that they didn't even read more of the headline. They're like, this is a good headline, share.
Yeah.
Did not even click on the article.
Yeah.
But if this was a social contract, it's not even that, because with the marijuana thing, like in the early 2000s, most people were at least on board for decriminalization, and that was almost 20 years ago. So even if it was a social contract, is it really an efficient one if society in general is all for not throwing people in jail for something, and then 18 years later they throw us a bone.
Yeah, really, right? Now that's a great point, actually. I just want
They were talking about it in Jean Chrétien. It was people were talking like, oh, this in like early 2000s, or like any day now, this is going to be decriminalized.
Well, sorry, go ahead, Bennett. You were staring at something.
getting a little bit breaking up there a little bit there. I don't know if it's on my end of it there. Anyways,
good to me.
Good now.
Yeah, okay, mine's fine. So what I was going to say was that the irony behind all that is it actually shows the fallacy of the whole concept, and it combines with central planning, right? Because when they brought all this stuff out, I remember there was a case in Hamilton specifically. They raided like 130 pounds of weed out of this dispensary. And there were no provinces in Canada that started with that much weed. And this was one little shop. So number one, they can't produce what they say they're going to produce. Number two, they're having to raid these small guys who have the product that people actually want. And right now, all my legal stocks have gone to shit. And I know these gray market sites are doing just fine.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Matt in apartment 16, he's kicking ass, man.
Right? And it's all because of legalization. Well, they didn't legalize shit. All they did was legalize their friends and rich people on ways to get rich.
Yeah, and somehow all these dumb stoners who decided to open up storefronts are having more profitable business than the government version.
Right. But now all the legal people are getting laid off because the industry's tanking.
Well, that's the thing.
It's an essential business.
Crazy.
That's one area. Actually, that's one thing I will always say, that the marijuana industry is one of the few places that we as libertarians have to actually point out the benefit and how amazing the free market actually works. Because there's very few areas in our life where you can actually point to a genuine place where there's no rules and regulations imposed by big government. Well, I mean, now with legalization, they're attempting to, but prior to that, the market of cannabis was completely what they deemed illegal, or the black market. So it functioned outside the realm of government mandates, edicts, or regulations. And the fact that it not only has not been quashed or quelled in the modern world with all the amazing attributes and methodologies that the state has to use to impose their will on people, the fact that it's not just flourishing, but literally destroying the business model of multi-billion-dollar corporations, right? Yeah. It just goes to show you, and why that is because it's all about efficiency. It's about, like I say, it's not just supply and demand. But it's about the fact there's a trust scenario, right? Mm-hmm. And your local guy, like Matt in apartment 6B, the only thing that he has at the end of the day to require you to come back and give him, business day after day or week after week, month after month is the fact that he's providing you with a good quality product, right, at a reasonable price. And that interaction only happens voluntarily because you can't force the person, right? So he knows, because of the feedback from the customer base, that's what the market does. It gives you a proper feedback loop so you know how to change your business model as it pertains to if you want to be profitable and to give your customer at the end of the day what they want. So you get that it's not zero sum, it's a win-win situation or an error. Once again, once you place that in the hands of government, where the government, even though they do have the pretense of force to put the gun to my head, well, they can't do it physically, put that gun to all 38 million Canadians simultaneously during in the same time, right? So no matter what they do, even under the direct threat of force, imprisonment, being locked in a cage, people are still willing because they know how superior the market is in terms of giving them what they want. And to me, all I would suggest to anyone is you take that, expand that from the market of cannabis, and that's another thing too. We all know as well that in the cannabis market that nobody's dying. There's no regulation, but yet you don't hear people dying of cannabis, right? And I'm not to suggest that.
And if one person did, that would be all over the news.
I know, right? And not to suggest that someone out there somewhere can't maybe lace a joint with something like, I don't know, Drano or something, right? Maybe screw you up. But once again, what would that be? What would that be to the private marketeer or the free market participant? Sure, they might get away with killing that, a person or maybe a couple people, but they've literally destroyed their own business model, right? So that's the thing. There's always a natural underlying structure and incentive model with the free market that never takes place when you can use force or basically proverbially put a gun to someone's head to use your business or service. And that's why the free market has always been superior, and it always will be. What it is, though, that people don't see any area outside of cannabis that actually function in the free market, because everything else has basically been taken over by government, heavily regulated, restricted, or dictated by big government. So they don't see any other applicable scenarios where they can say, this is where it works. If you're a cannabis user, you see it. You've got that already in your knowledge. What we need to do is expand on that and show other people. And that's the thing with people with the blockchain, using smart contracts. This is an era where we're showing there are other examples where this is going to come to light, where you can use free market without using force, and it'll work out to be conducive and beneficial for everyone. But once again, we're still in that early stages where we don't have enough examples to show the people. So what we have to use instead is our logic, our reasoning, and moral and ethical consistency while we're trying to explain these things.
Yeah, I had some experience. I bought a few things off the Silk Road back in the day when that was around, and of course the default is, well, you don't know what you're going to get. Well, first off, the weed dealer doesn't want to waste all that capital buying extra Drano to lace their stuff. But
Exactly,
with anything, it's a reputation. It was basically a black market eBay, and you had ratings. And if somebody was selling garbage, then nobody else would buy from them. And if a new seller comes on the market, every time there's a brand new person, they would sell like a small quantity for a low price just to have some interactions and build up a bit of a reputation. And everything was held in, it was a very buyer friendly market, because like your Bitcoin went into what's it called? I forget. And it just went into the website, and then that wasn't released until you as a buyer said, I got my shit. And now there's more opportunity for the buyer to get their stuff and just say that it never came and rip off the dealer, but that didn't end up being an issue. So what happens is, if you want to roll the dice on somebody with no reputation, then you buy a little bit for cheap, and then you leave a good review, and then other people are more likely to take that risk. And there's all kinds of, whatever you're afraid of, that's an opportunity for somebody to sell you the version of it that you like.
Uh-huh.
So, it's funny. There's a whole Reddit about that, right? With the gray market sites. So you can go on there and people evaluate them. And people are like, oh, yeah, I lost my whole order. Canada Post stole it, but they shipped me a new one.
Yeah.
Right. Like they literally shipped you more gray market weed totally for free, paid the shipping costs and everything because some asshole at Canada Post stole your order.
With an alternative to a government thing, it's always, but what if this happens? Then if I want to convince you to send me money, then I've got to make you not afraid that that's going to happen. It's my job.
Yeah. It almost seems like we're getting into a conversation about how monopolies can only arise with the help of government force. Do we want to go into that a little bit?
Hey, if you want.
The only other way is if you're really good and nobody else can compete with you.
Well, that's true. There are such things as natural monopolies, right? If you offer a better product and a service compared to everyone else around you, I'm going there. Right? I think that is just a natural thing. But that's another thing, actually, when we talk about these things, and we might try to use examples, right? The problem is, though, is the unknowns that we're not familiar with, right? Because that's the thing we have got to remember when you talk about market participants, and with big government regulating and dictating control, and how it all plays out is how would it be in the absence of big government? So we can pick the lesser evils or what's more conducive to freedom under the current system paradigm, but we're still dealing and functioning in an era, in a realm where the state still has a lot of control, right? So this is one of those things when you're talking about, monopolization of industries. There's so many different things that we have to take into account to expand our mindset and think about, like I say, not just narrowly focused on what is particularly taking place in that company, that corporation, but what are the rules? What are the underwriting rules? Because that's another thing for me. I would love to be a participant in the market in a multitude of ways. I've got a lot of ideas. I have that kind of entrepreneurial zeal about me. I've always been like that. But I just recognize that currently that the cards are so stacked against me, right? That I basically have to sell a lot of myself out, a lot of my morals and my ethics, in order for me to be able to bring anything to fruition in this modern world, other than function into the gray or the black markets. And that's the area where I've always had the issue with is, could I create a better business model? Possibly, but how much of myself, how much of my sovereignty, how much of my freedom, how much of my liberty am I willing to sacrifice to delve into that and to play in that particular game? That's a difficult one, but it is something that I think we all have to understand at some point in the day is if we don't offer something, right? That's the thing with those of us who are proponents of freedom and liberty and the market as a solution. If we are not offering solutions, even under the current paradigm, for people to gravitate to, how are they? If we want people to remove themselves or vacate the state, well, how are we going to do so if we don't have actual solutions on hand or on offer for them, right? That's a big issue for me.
And how do we come up with those if you don't want to start the business because you don't know if the government's going to shut it down on you the next day? Take a look at the just Randall. Take a look at the gun question, right? Like a lot of the guns that that got banned, some of these things were designed within the last 2 years specifically for the Canadian market.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a whole company now that they're suing that they backed out of the Charter Challenge, and they're now suing for $70 million of destruction of business, basically, because the day before this was all completely legal shit and you authorized it.
Yeah.
So there's your social contract. Thanks for your business. And this goes back to Adamson's barbecue and his famous line of, "I didn't sign up to be sacrificed."
Yeah. Great point. Great
right?
point.
Doug Ford is like, we need some sacrifices. I didn't fucking volunteer for that.
Yeah, really. Let me just say, actually, before anyone else says anything too, thanks for all the fine folks that have joined the stream so far, and I appreciate all the great comments. Like I say, we'll get it. We'll definitely get the ample time and opportunity. As a matter of fact, we'll probably do an entire stream where it's just taking answers just taking questions and answering some of them, on a live stream. But as it is today, we're just going to, like I say, we're trying to deal with the whole pretense. And actually, let me just say this, guys, if you don't mind, because I do want to was going to reference Lysander Spooner and obviously no treason and the importance of some of the rhetoric that contained within that. I just wanted to read a little bit there first and foremost, and maybe we can kind of expand on some of that if you guys don't mind. But if you wanted to actually just stick with what we were talking about now, like what Ryan was suggesting, I can hold off and wait a little bit. I'll just give you guys, the opportunity to chime in. What do you think?
I'm good with whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, like I said, because I just especially when we're talking about the social contract, I thought that this was something because, like I say, people can hear, and I would definitely suggest and recommend, and I'll make sure to place a link to that in the description of this stream, is the no treason. Like I say, and you can listen to it in audio form. Liberty in Our Time, I believe, is the YouTube channel that has uploaded, so you can get it as an ebook kind of deal where you can, even if you don't have the time to sit down and read it, well, you can listen to it while you're doing the dishes or working on your car or do whatever, so you at least get the opportunity to expand on your knowledge in regards to what Lysander had to spoon in terms of the social contract. But let me just bring it up here because I'm going to read just a little bit from it here, folks. Okay, so here we go. Wonder how this is going to work with all four of us on the stream. Oh, so I guess you can bring it up on the side. Okay, excellent. Okay, so as you can see, this is out of libertyfund.org. Anyway, Spooner on the difference between a government and a highwayman, 1870. So that's a picture of Lysander Spooner there on your left. The legal theorist, abolitionist, and radical individualist Lysander Spooner, 1808 to 1887, applied the same moral principles to the actions of an organization as he did to a single individual. This led him to make some harsh criticisms of the government, as this quotation reveals. But this theory of our governments is wholly different from a practical fact. The fact is that the government, like a highwayman, says to a man, your money or your life. And many, if not most, taxes are paid under the compulsion of that threat. The government does not, indeed, waylay a man in a lonely place, spring upon him from the roadside, and holding a pistol to his head, proceed to rifle his pockets. But the robbery is nonetheless a robbery on that account, and is far more dastardly and shameful. The highwayman takes solely upon himself the responsibility, danger, and crime of his own act. He does not pretend that he has any rightful claim to your money or that he intends to use it for your own benefit. He does not pretend to be anything but a robber. He has not acquired impudence enough to profess to be merely a protector, and that he takes men's money against their will merely to enable him to protect those infatuated travelers who feel perfectly able to protect themselves or do not appreciate his peculiar system of protection. He is too sensible a man to make such professions as these. Furthermore, having taken your money, he leaves you as you wish him to do. He does not persist in following you on the road against your will, assuming to be your rightful sovereign, or on account of the protection he affords you. He does not keep protecting you by commanding you to bow down and serve him, by requiring you to do this and forbidding you to do that, by robbing you of more money as often as he finds it for his interest or pleasure to do so, and by branding you as a rebel, a traitor, and an enemy to your country, and shooting you down without mercy if you dispute his authority or resist his demands. He is too much of a gentleman to be guilty of such impostures and insults and villainies as these. In short, he does not, in addition to robbing you, attempt to make you either his dupe or his slave. And that, my friends, is the big thing why when people say, oh, defund the police or this stuff, and oh, what, aren't you scared about what your neighbor's going to do? Aren't you going to be scared about the thieves? No, because just like Lysander Spooner acknowledged, the common thief, right, the criminal takes that sole responsibility on himself, which means that they and they alone acknowledge that retaliation is not just justified, but very much a potential. That, my friends, is the big difference between the common thief or the common criminal and the state, is the fact that the people who are going to impose themselves or take from you against your will are the ones that are going to be personally responsible and accountable, and you can hold them to that as such. The state completely removes that entirely.
Yeah.
Anyways,
that quote, when I read that, I felt like that was the best explanation of the taxation as theft argument that I'd ever seen. And he goes a step further and is saying it's even worse than theft.
Yeah.
Oh,
and,
yeah. I mean,
that's a tough pill for people to swallow, because if you say like taxation is theft, their answer is but social contract.
Yep.
Yeah.
And there's no definition of theft that you could come up with, anybody, that doesn't include that. And like, if I pickpocket you and I buy something nice for you with some of it, I'm still stealing.
Yeah.
There's another great article out there about that by Jack Donovan. I think I brought this up last time on the call. It's called Violence is Golden. And it basically just says, it doesn't matter what your interaction is with government. As soon as that action starts to go sideways, there may be more steps involved depending on where you start. But at the end of the day, it comes down to the tip of a gun. It could be a zoning bylaw, your dog, whatever. But at the end of the day, it flows down the path to deadly force. Government has to have, at the end of the day, the monopoly on deadly force, or government has no power whatsoever. So one of the things I like to do, and this goes back to your original post there, Bennett, about the people voluntarily going back to the line if they don't, take a vaccine or wear a mask. Somebody says, "Oh yeah, we should. The government should make a rule to do that." It's like, okay, are you willing to go take a gun and put it at someone's head because they, did whatever? They parked on the wrong side of the road, or they had their music up too late, or are you willing to send someone else with a gun to do that? Better yet, go do it yourself. Or how about we just go talk to them and say, hey, can you turn that shit down? Try to come up with a mutually agreeable way to do it, right?
Yeah, nobody
people don't
sees the
that.
gun pointed at their head. So when you bring that up, they're like, oh, you're just some wild conspiracy theorist. Stop listening to all those podcasts.
Until you see stories of, old guys losing their houses for $6 in back taxes and crap like that. The sheriff.
Yeah, and it's always just, well, I'm happy to give my money because I don't want poor people to die. Like, if I could trade the same amount of money for less dead poor people, then I would sign up for it. But nobody fucking asked.
Yeah. Using someone else's money to help other people is the least benevolent way to do it.
Yeah, well, Spooner talks a lot about consent in this book, which should resonate with these people, especially in this modern time, but they just don't make the connection. Like, the difference between tax and charity is the same as the difference between sex and rape, but that's not usually a good metaphor for somebody that doesn't want to hear it. And they're like, but are you saying that taxes is just as bad as rape? I'm like, no, it's an SAT question. It's the same relationship between two separate things. But
you've been pretty quiet there, Ryan. Did you want to chime in there, buddy?
Well, I mean, someone mentioned the word conspiracy theorist a couple minutes ago, and I mean, this is a bit of a tangent from the conversation we're on, but I wanted to talk about Tommy Douglas, who some people consider as the greatest Canadian. And I just brought up Tommy Douglas's Wikipedia page for some of this. It's pretty easy to find. And Tommy Douglas, for those who don't know, was a eugenicist. I'd like to have a conversation about the implications of eugenics. I know that I had also wanted to talk about your Liberty Hunters 17 I watched a couple days ago, where you talked about China and things like that. What I thought was admirable about that episode that you guys did was that you completely blew right past COVID and everything there, and we haven't even touched on COVID here, which I think is great. We're kind of blowing right by some of the false premises and narratives that are involved with that. But I think that when we talk about the social contract and things that government expect of us, our responsibilities, and then the lack of accountability in government and all of that, I think it's very important to touch on the very basis which Tommy Douglas is with universal health care, and then maybe have a conversation about eugenics and COVID altogether. Do you think that's something we could delve into a little bit? I know it's a big beast. It is a big beast.
Well, No, I'm totally, listen, there's not a topic or subject matter that I won't cover. I'm just saying, but for this particular series, and I definitely do that with you as a standalone video, or I should say a standalone stream, 100%. As a matter of fact, if you want to do that, we can do that subsequent. But for this particular series, like I say, it's the pretense of, and the importance why I think it's so important to just stay centrally focused and hyper-focused on this is by sheer fact that, like I say, with this great reset, this is basically the New Deal, right? This is the New Deal. And they're trying to forward. Right. Well, I mean, that's another people that these ideas that they construct and how you can manipulate, billions of people. So I get it. That's lots of central planners have lots of ways and methodologies and areas where they want to control every aspect of our social and economic life. Right. But to me, the most important part is the fact that the Great Reset is out there. It's being focused on by those in the media. So, this is something that people are being privy to, and they're learning about this thing. Great Reset. What are you talking about, right? Even the people that are so apolitical or unknowing or ignorant to some of the concepts that we understand, they're at least hearing these things being bantered around. So, to me, the most important thing, which is why I wanted to bring this series to light, is because this is something that's being bantered about and talked about. I can't help but think back during the day when they were trying to introduce the New Deal. I'm quite sure there are probably libertarians even at that point in time that were out there trying to warn against this pretense of the Great Reset in terms of big government. Because basically what big government's going to do is they're going to be able to paint over, if they get it done the way they want to do, is paint over all the malfeasance, all the bad actors, all the economic destruction, all that thing that they've done, and create the reset where we as the people are somehow going to gain some benefit or advantage. In reality, they are the ones. Well, there might be some small, superficial benefit economically, maybe by a Great Reset, where we can go now become, a bunch of mindless consumers, right, and pump up even more debts. But the implications in terms of being economically and socially enslaved, they're still right there, front and center. Which is why, to me, it's vitally important to make sure that not just us, from Gen X, of course. I definitely entice the baby boomers to get on board and help support us. But I'm talking about generational theft, intergenerational theft, and intergenerational, well, not just theft, but intergenerational enslavement as well. So to me, I want to get this information out there for people that are willing to live to it. And because we live in the information age, let's get this stuff and let's be wise and prudent in what we've got to say, so that we can make sure that we're articulating properly, that anyone gets the opportunity to watch this, where they're going to be able to think about these things critically, and we're at least saying those things, just like me years ago when I heard something profound that Ron Paul said that really, really piqued my curiosity. What I want to do in this series is for all this to contribute in a way where we're piquing people's interest and curiosity. So at the very least, they're trying to think critically about these issues. Because to me, that is the most important thing that I can do, and we can all do for not just ourselves, but like I say, our successive generations and anyone that comes behind us, so that they can genuinely make informed and proper decisions and how they want their own personal circumstances or the rest of the world to unfold before their eyes. Because actually, we all have to play our role, and we are participants, right? Because that's the one thing. We don't all just get to escape and run off into the woods, right? Some will, right? But, you know, the rest of us have to function. So we have to get to the point where there is going to be a pretense, right? There's going to be people who are trying to suggest that there's a contract and how we socially or economically engage or interact with each other. The point is for us to get out in front and make sure that we're the ones that are showing universal consistency in terms of morality, legality, and ethical standards, so that people, if there is this new reset or something where we're going to create a whole new way or paradigm how we deal with each other, that we are the ones that are leading the charge, not the statists or the authoritarian collectivists.
Yeah.
If there is such a thing as a social contract, this great reset is a breaking of that contract, because they're pushing through stuff that even within the terrible system we have would be political suicide. But now they've got their opportunity to do the stuff that nobody actually wants unless they're super scared.
Yeah. Yeah, you bet.
So whatever the social contract was before didn't allow them to do these things, but now we're in a state of panic. So let's push through some of this stuff that, by definition, if we live in a democracy, if people wanted it, they would vote for it. But that's not required anymore.
Let's just take a little tangent here off those two things, what you just said, John, and what Bennett said. So I've got the book here, Skin in the Game. If you haven't read this, right, by Nicholas Taleb, read this book. This is incredible. Hey, Matt. So let's talk about the connection between social contract and intergenerational theft, various ways through social policy. So social policy, by allowing government
to bring that in.
to dictate
John,
different things.
That's the perfect time to bring the intergenerational theft into it, because I just brought my son into the chat. So intergenerational theft is a perfect topic to discuss. But go ahead, John. Sorry.
Yeah, that's cool. If you take a look around at your town today, how many different things can you see falling through the government cracks? Right. And that's today with our level of funding and resources. And all they want to do is centralize that more and make more decisions. And those cracks are going to get fucking bigger. Whereas the real way to do this is to decentralize as much as possible, which also means you can't treat people as the same as every other people that they look like. So here's the other aspect of that is, if we treat a little black girl the same as we have treated little black girls for the last 50 years, guess what she's going to turn out like? Or a little native girl, or a little blind girl, or a boy, or whatever, right? Collectivism it destroys all sorts of different things, and it festers in all sorts of little ways that we don't think about that generates these policies.
Yeah. Oh, you said a mouthful there, John. 100%. It actually bothers me tremendously when I hear people talk about entire demographics, races, or sexes in such a collective manner, because it's so soul crushing and destroying for those people and their ability to think, have any self-esteem. Anyways, chime in there, Matt. Go ahead.
Oh, I've been listening to you guys for 50 minutes. I thought I could bring some different opinions in here. So to my thought on the social contract, what I think happened is we just evolved as apes, and from the beginning of history, at the start, it was the guy who could pick up the biggest rock, who was the toughest in the tribe, who usually ran it by an iron fist, and for the protection of the weaklings, they kind of went with the strong people who ran the shit, because it kept the tribe safe for the most part. And that's how it's been done for the longest time. And then we get this blip of this new existence where we get modernized in the last, you could say, 1,000 years, 500 years, whatever you want, if you want to include the Industrial Revolution, a couple hundred years. But the point is, during that transition time, these rulers have still been in place. These guys who rule with an iron fist, they've gotten used to it, but they now start to understand that the serfs, as the world gets more peaceful and more enlightened, and there's less violence in the street, they have to get more smarter and adapt the way that they control people. So now they have to convince you that the monopoly, the state violence is acceptable. They have to educate you from 5 years old. They have to use all these other tactics to manipulate your brain. So that's kind of where the social contract has come in, is because we've done it for so long, for a certain way, which is through just sheer violence. And then your rulers have just gotten smart, and if they've used the education system and other means to convince you guys that the social contract in its main state today is acceptable. And I think what my dad's getting at when he talks about the Great Reset and why it's so important nowadays is we understand and we think that the Great Reset is the signing of the new social contract. And what is the new social contract going to consist of? Well, as the state gets more and more peaceful, it's going to be hard to justify themselves. So they're going to have to give more to you as a serfdom. And this is where the basic income makes plausible sense. Basically, yeah, we don't care. Sit on the couch, do whatever you want, and they're going to rate you, I think, how you will climb up in their new Great Reset, in the Great Reset world, how you may climb up in your employment system, how you may climb up in your wealth brackets is you're a good citizen. And this will be judged by your social credit, which we see how China already does it. And a lot of people get comfortable if you can sit on the couch and the government just gives you a couple grand a month. That will eliminate a lot of freedom fighters and a lot of liberty people who will get complacent. And the state just realizes that they can no longer use the violent way and punch us in the face like they could back thousands of years ago and say, this is how we do it. So now they got to give you a stipend. They educate you and they convince you the Great Reset, the social contract, all this stuff makes sense. And it makes sense to me why they've convinced people, because most people are followers. Most people are not the tribe leaders. Most people are not the individuals who wants to run out and run into the buildings and fire, save people, jump in the rivers, all this kind of stuff. Just look at how they do these social experiments in the world or in different cultures, and people don't intervene in most cases. So I think the liberty movement runs around because we're the type of people who would jump in the lake to save the lady, thinking that, oh my God, why doesn't everyone think like us? It's like, no, the vast majority of people would rather deal with their self-interest, would rather, if there's a chance that they could drown themselves jumping in the lake, let's not take that chance. And this is how I'd say at least half of the world thinks. And they kind of go where the leader base tells them to go, as long as they're safe and they're going to be taken care of. So for the longest time now, this is how they've convinced everyone that it's okay. And they've done this through the military and the police, right? That's what the state is. We got to give these guys the monopoly of power. Sorry, we have to do it this way. But it's because terrorism. It's because drug dealers. It's because of gangbangers. And it's getting us right back to that primal brain of, oh, we got to have them keep us safe. We're just little chimps. We got to have the big chimp run around keeping us safe. So we haven't really evolved. We still have these animalistic behaviors. We still think animalistic ways, and we mimic our behaviors, you know? Yeah. I just look at right now, this may sound a little gross, but I'm dealing with puppies and I'm trying to convince them not to eat their own dog crap, but they just got used to seeing their mother eating their own dog crap. So it's a learned behavior that they have to eventually grow out of. And, the same way with human beings, we thought the Aztecs thought if they didn't sacrifice someone, the sun might not rise. And North Koreans think that Kim Jong-un might be listening to their inner thoughts. So people don't understand the power of human conditioning. If you rule over the human brain a certain way with force, you condition them, you tell them every day that if you don't kill someone, the sun ain't going to rise. 50% of the population are followers, are easily conditioned, and will just go along with the flow as long as they're taken care of. And this is why it's down to us leaders, us people that actually have balls between our legs, to stand up and do the right thing, because the ones who are the sociopaths and psychopaths, their characteristics show they're more than willing to do this and rule us with an iron fist and just convince you it's under the guise of social democracy.
Yeah.
I think there's some truth to the argument that most people would voluntarily sign up for the social contract, whatever that is. But the problem is that if you don't require 100% consent, that stops, even if it's everybody in the world except for us five, everybody in the world can keep operating as they have been. But if the five of us get together and provide a living counterexample, then nobody gets to see that maybe our crazy nonsense would actually work and all of the scary consequences that they warned us about don't actually happen.
Yeah. Let me just say one thing for the rest of you guys chime in, and definitely I want all you guys to chime in. I just want to say though real quick, because this is something that's really important that I have a real hard time with even myself, is the Hobbesian thing versus, whether people, you can't trust people because they're evil or like, the whole equation, right? I think that's a false dilemma, because I think people, what I always deal with, and that's where my economic side of me and just the psychological understanding of human nature, and I will recommend to people too, Mises, Human Nature, that's a really important book as well, is is not, I don't even think that most people are inherently bad, nor do I believe that most people are inherently good. But what I do understand 100% with clarity is that people, and just like the state of nature in animals or trees, right? It's all about self-preservation. The incentive of all living beings is about self-preservation. Whatever is most conducive to self-preservation. So you can set up all kinds of situations or scenarios where you create these wars, these conflicts, but just by sheer fact of pitting people against each other and saying, well, either you survive or they survive. It's a zero-sum game, right? But to me, that's a false dilemma. And same with the believing that either people are so stupid we just can't trust people with power, or that people are smart enough that we can't trust people with power. So to me, it's a false dilemma. It's just understanding human psychology and the human mind is just that, listen, people are going to be automatically incentivized to preserve themselves. That's to be the fact that we're all alive today and we've made it through those thousands of generations of offspring that has gone before us and all have died. The fact that we're alive today means that we were a benefit of people that did things that were either more conducive. There might have been some fortune, might have been some luck, but there was something that gave them the ability to live and thrive and survive as opposed to someone else. And once again, I think a lot of it has to do with, there's biological contributing factors, but incentive is a big key contributor to not just the human experiment, but also even nature itself. So to me, I don't believe it's that there are some people so bad. I think what it is at the end of the day, and I think that the historians, in terms of if you go all the way back to Greece and Aristotle and Plato and Socrates, I think most of those philosophers understood what it is at the end of the day, which is why education has become so profound and so important. And it's an unfortunate thing that the state has taken over that, but it's people, it's your intellect, it's your critical thinking skills. That's what's important. If you're living in a society of people who are conducive to thinking critically about issues, then I suppose democracy, right, might be something that may possibly be beneficial for the greater good, right? Not just for individuals, for the greater good. If most people recognize that it's beneficial for me, but if it's beneficial for me, that means it's not beneficial to anyone else in the collective, right? But once again, it requires that we place the emphasis on the individual, because it's good for the individual. Then everyone in society or the collective, we're all individuals. There's no such thing as a collective, just like there's no such thing as the forest. Well, I mean, you can use that as a description of a bunch of individual trees, but at the end of the day, there's individual trees. Just like with humans, there's individual humans. So at the end of the day, once again, we got to get back to, at least if we're going to deal with people socioeconomically, is the rules of engagement, at the very least, minimally so, have to be consistent, where nobody gets any automatic benefit or advantage against the other person in terms of the rules of engagement. That's the biggest and most important aspect of it, as far as I'm concerned. But anyways, go ahead, you guys. Sorry, I know I went on a bit of a ramble there.
So you bring up an interesting point there, Bennett, in that the idea of who would I trust more, a collective faceless government or my neighbor, right? So I actually have a shirt that I like to wear that says "I hate people," because generally I don't like people very much. I'm kind of a loner, right? But at the end of the day, I know my neighbor, I know his name, I know what he looks like, and I know what his interests are. But more than that, I can better gauge his
demeanor,
his
intentions,
his desires, yes, his wants, his needs, and what that's going to mean for a decision of his. The collectivist mentality of the government, as we've seen, negates all that. It actually spins it up and makes it worse, right? Because that collectivist mentality can have that collectivist group changing overnight on you, right? And those demands change overnight. So one of my favorite friends on Facebook, he made a post in regards to this that said it has to do with a riot control. The larger the crowd is, the exponentially more stupid they become. Which from a riot control perspective makes total sense, and it makes total sense when you apply it to government too. So one of the books that I have over Christmas is going to be Choice, which is Robert P. Murphy's distillation of human action. So hopefully I'll get through that. Yeah, a lot faster than Human Action, because I still have about 30 hours left on that. But I think if we apply just, even the basic concept that people understand of the 80-20 rule, which seems to pop up in business and economics, I can correctly predict my neighbor probably about 80% of the time. And I'd rather do that than try to be wrong on my government 20% of the time. Because I'll be happier with the outcomes.
Yeah. Well, at least under the situation where your neighbor is just your neighbor. The problem is today, though, this is the situation with the social contract, and Lysander Spooner definitely dealt with this part of it. This is the area which is why government it creates an automatic atmosphere of suspicion, right, amongst each other, because you don't know as much as even the situation or scenario that you just painted sounds good in theory, but do you know what your neighbor's voting for when they show up? Right.
And that's the interesting point. So I live on a circle, right? Or a crescent. So let's say that we decided to create ourselves an association. Well, now I give the right to these people to vote. So I may trust that neighbor, his one vote doesn't have necessarily an effect on me. But as soon as we start talking majorities, now people start taking my shit and moving into my house and borrowing my stuff, and that's the power of that collective mindset.
But that's the thing. You don't
and it's okay with them.
Yeah, but you don't even know if it's a minority or majority, because here's the thing with voting on something that Lysander put out there front and center. Just
most of it's minority.
He just slapped us right in the face with it. But the ballot is secret, right? It's completely secret. Nobody has any clue. You have no clue. Right? Even if I come out from the voting booth tomorrow and say, yeah, I voted for Harper, Trudeau, Mulcair, whatever the hell at the time, right? You don't know that I'm lying to you or being, deceitful in any way. I could have voted for whoever, but it just wants to steal your money, right? That's the thing with having a secret ballot and this whole construct of the social contract is even how do you hold anyone to account if everybody's ballot is secret? You don't even know. So let's say, okay, the Liberals come to power and all the imposition, all the economic enslavement. Well, who are we going to hold to account? I would ask, right? Because I don't know who the hell. There's no way for any one of us to know who the hell actually voted to take more and more of my productivity or my son's productivity, or eventually when he has children, the productivity of his children. I have no idea. There's zero chance of me ever knowing who has chosen to arbitrarily decide to economically enslave my grandchildren. That alone, and that's the beauty of what I'll just point out right now with blockchain and smart contracts. If those are proponents of democracy, let's put this shit right let's make it so that you have a smart contract where it's not so much about just pure anonymity, but where there is actual accountability involved, right? If you want to economically enslave me or my kids or my grandkids, well, you need to show that you are willing to put your name on the dotted line, and I can make sure to hold you to account for the fact that you personally agreed that you want to economically enslave my kid. Because then I know who my enemy is, right? Then I know who the hell it is that wants to proverbially put the gun to my head or my kid's head or my grandkid's head. But that's the thing with the secret ballot is there's no way for any of us to hold anyone to account.
I just want to make a quick note on that, and that's just that representative democracy as a whole, it allows us to delegate our responsibilities as far as governance goes to someone else, which gives us less incentive to be informed about the goings on of government and things like that. And I'm not saying that I'm a proponent of a direct democracy per se. That's a whole new conversation. But as far as representative versus direct goes, having a direct say on these policies of the government would hold a lot of more people accountable. And when we talk about accountability in government, accountability is something that a lot of people can't even hold themselves accountable on the day-to-day. So if you can't hold yourself accountable on the day-to-day, how can you honestly expect that you can hold the government accountable? So that's just the little tidbit I had on that note.
I think it's all going to boil back to education. I like to adapt tactics that work. And I've seen that my opponents, the statists, the government, the ruling class, they clearly understand by grabbing a child at the age of 5 years old, teaching them to raise their hand to go to the washroom at the age of that age. And then we take them all the way now into universities and colleges. And sometimes you're not done your education until you're 25 and up. So I think the state has realized that it comes down to education. It comes down to brainwashing and conditioning the mind. And I think now it's on the shoulders and responsibilities of all the fathers and mothers out there to start making sure that if you can't at least homeschool your kids, private school, something, but you need to understand sending it to public school, you're creating generations that are acceptable to authoritarian governments, that are acceptable to control, to acceptable to when a pandemic rolls in, to give up all their rights. You know, there's a reason why I look at the movies like 300. It's why I like wearing the shirt. You know, Xerxes has to whip his slaves to go forward. Leonidas only needs to walk forward and his men walk behind him. Why? Education, training, and the environments in which those two different sects of cultures were raised in. So it comes down to education, folks, and that's what it's going to take. So until, as much as Trump, as much as the Liberty Movement wants to fight politics and win here and there, until we take the kids out of public school because it's dangerous, we see what it creates, until we can start trusting that the public schools aren't getting funding now we're finding out from China and other infiltrators to try to push their propaganda through the kids, it's not safe anymore. And this is why we've ended up in the state we are today.
Beautiful.
Yeah, well, I spent some time in education, and I remember when I was in university, they talked a lot about part of our job as teachers is to create good citizens. And I didn't realize at the time how insidious of a concept that is, and what's a good citizen and who are we to decide. And I found while I was in it, it wasn't about what anybody learned, because there was all kinds of smart kids that just didn't behave well, that failed, and there was lots of dumb kids that do what you ask them, and they do just fine. So it's really about obedience more than it is about education. If you can sit down, shut up, and do what you're told, you'll be just fine. And
I totally forgot that you were a
teacher
teacher prior there, John. Actually, that's something that's really important. And not only, I'm really, really thankful that you introduced yourself to us, because not only are you a comedian, but you're also, and a fellow NDer, but you're also, yes, you were a teacher in the past. So you understand a lot of this stuff yourself, you know, quite profoundly, because you lived in the belly of the beast. So actually, like I say, I'm really glad that John has chosen to join us today. And of course, to the rest of you folks too, because like I say, this is the beautiful thing about bringing multitudes of Canadians together to talk about this issue. As I guarantee you folks, you know, we all come from different variances in terms of backgrounds and, you know, how we were raised, and some of the philosophical and moral concepts that maybe we've been inundated with ourselves over the years. But at the very least, like I say, we've at least all shown the skill, the ability to at least be willing to think critically about these issues and to have our own conceptions or premises challenged. And to me, that's the most important thing. And why I know that we're still in a massive uphill battle is the fact that those who are supposed to be proponents of libertarianism, or when you're talking about classical liberal, right, or even conservatives, when I see, right, that genuine conservatives or genuine liberals, you know, in the Western sense and the Western ideals, are willing to sit down and engage honestly and forthright with libertarians and have these kind of discussions and debates, then I'll know we're somewhere where we have the potential to get somewhere where we might be able to find a way where we can all live and cohabitate peacefully, right, and exist among each other. What we're seeing today, though, folks, is there are certain subsect of us in any particular country or geographical area that are willing to engage in these conversations, because we're all about, you know, learning and pursuing the truth, knowledge, and consistent messaging. Whereas other people, they want to reject all that entirely, because they recognize the minute they've entered into this arena that their ideology goes by the wayside and gets destroyed. So people who want to live ideologically or who are ideologically driven are never willing to engage in these conversations. When I was a young man, even a little kid, and I used to question, you know, because I come from a very religious family, I used to question some of the concepts or premises that were espoused to me by preachers in these religious institutions. I was always told, just don't question, right? It is what it is. And I've seen as an adult man at 50 years old, it's been now translated and converted into its mysticism of the religion of Christianity. Now it's the state. The state has now become the new arbiter of truth, and don't ever question it. And that's the part that I find most profoundly difficult to deal with, is because at least growing up, only some people were either, you know, Catholic, Protestant, Presbyterian. There was at least genuine competition, even among the religious dogmatists, right? There was still competition, right? And infighting and bickering, which still at least raised and elevated us. Now it's the universalized message of indoctrination, of subjecting yourself, your mind, and everything that you think about critically to the state. And once I recognize that you get to the point where dogmatists have all aligned with each other and have even forgone competition or critical thinking for the sake of an overarching umbrella of a dogma or an ideology, then I know that it's profoundly important. And that's what we have to do today, is help break people free from this. And trust me, it's not going to be an easy test. Like Matt was saying earlier on, it starts every one of us about the time we're 4 or 5 years old. Like that's
you're locked into a very narrow range of acceptable opinions. Most people, if there's a problem, it's, should the government solution, where should it be on the left to right spectrum? Nobody's saying like, what's the best solution to this problem? It's what's the least bad government solution.
Right. Statism is the new cultism, right? So there's a great quote that charity has never been the purview of government, but we can now add on until the fall of modern religion, right?
Yeah, and it doesn't even need to do a good job.
Exactly.
If it doesn't deliver on the kind of the reciprocal benefit outlined in this social contract, then they just say, well, you idiots didn't do it right, or we need even more money. The worse the education system does, they're like, well, we need more resources. And it's always, there's never been a point, I don't think, where they've gotten less resources, but compared to 20, 30 years ago, there are less people that have basic literacy skills. And it's always, well, we need to throw more money at the problem. My last year of full-time teaching, our number one expense they mentioned in one of our staff meetings was on photocopies. So like number one expense is just printing off stuff like sheets for kids to fill out. And like even within the educational research and stuff, nobody thinks that's a good way to teach. Nobody thinks having one person standing at the front of the classroom writing stuff on the board that everybody else copies down and parrots back on a test, that doesn't even make any sense within their own framework, but that's how it pans out. And it hasn't changed much since the early days of public education system, where they wanted to spit out people to work in a factory on an assembly line. It hasn't changed much since then.
Yeah,
and no matter how bad it does, it's always, you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but sometimes the baby sucks too.
I think if we go back to what Matt said, the governments have realized that we are at a critical juncture in history, right? And that's what they're capitalizing on, right? And I think individuals need to realize that we're at a critical juncture as well, and take your own steps to counteract that. Number one is the education of our kids. We talked about this last time, where I've pulled my kids out. I've always been a fan of homeschooling, but this has actually given me the impetus to have to do that, because my wife has had to, be at home because they got kicked out of school last year. So right there, we made that decision that we're going to do X, Y, Z to protect ourselves in the midst of all this. But it goes back to, who formed the first schools in North America. There were some colonies that the rich people had their own schooling. They hired teachers and stuff to raise their kids. But your public schools in North America were started by the Puritans and the Roman Catholic Church. And it was pure indoctrination. That was the whole point of it.
Well, let me just throw something out there for you guys to think about, because I think, as far as how old are you, Ryan?
What's that? Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. How old are you again?
I'm 29 myself.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're the same age as my son. And Jon Forward, how old are you, sir?
Just turned 38.
Okay, so 30. So we're definitely talking about Gen Xers and millennials. And this is, once again, just me thinking out loud here. But one thing I definitely understood that gave me some bit of difference as comparison or contrast to other past generations or such, and not just me, but many people in my age peer group and stuff, is the fact that we Gen Xers, or at least a substantial portion of us at least, had this amazing freedom. Not because our parents decided that's what they were just going to do, but our mothers were one of the very first generations of people that are actually going in full large scale. Now, of course, after World War I, of course, the boomers too, right? They were going into to the workforce as well. But Gen Xers at that point in time, our parents, which a lot of them were boomers, obviously, were going into the workforce. And basically, because the women, the mother and the father were both working, it was one of the first generations throughout history or modern history that I'm aware of, where we had this weird amount of freedom that wasn't afforded to us because they wanted to give us freedom. It's just that you just had it by sheer fact that nobody was paying babysitters. Grandma was the babysitter, if at best, right? And absent grandma or grandpa, you were out doing your goddamn thing and whatever. But the beautiful thing about that autonomy that was afforded to us, whether it was done rightfully or just by sheer fact of circumstance, is it allowed us to navigate the world, right? All by ourselves. And we had to learn a lot of concepts. So even though we were told a lot of crazy stuff in the past, we had to learn these things and test these hypotheses in real world, in real time, which gave us some real world understanding of how the world actually functions, as opposed to how we've been taught that it properly functions. And we've seen the discrepancies and the differences because we had that freedom and that autonomy. Now, I will say about the millennials, one thing I will say is the millennials, in terms of the formal indoctrination and education, they've gotten it even worse than we did. And they didn't get those social real life freedoms that we had, because a lot of their parents were helicopter parents. But I will say one thing that kind of gives the millennials an advantage and aligns them very closely with Gen Xers in some way, at least, is the fact that they got to experience the wild, wild west too. Absolute unbridled freedom. It wasn't in the real world, in the physical realm, but it was on the computer, right? So think about it. Prior to now, we know that regulations and rules are being ramped up to the point where they're trying to micromanage, dictate, and control everything that we see and hear on the internet. But, the internet came to exist, and I remember even go back. I go all the way back to Windows 95. I can go all the way back to Commodore VIC 20. That's how far I go back. But let's just get up to the millennials and give them their due in terms of whether you're talking about Windows 98 and everything. So they've had like that kind of wild, wild west freedom in the internet realm. So it's like the people that want to expand their knowledge is like the sky was the limit. Just like those of us Gen Xers, the sky was the limit when you go out in your little social paradigm. You got 10 of your peers all hanging out. You want to play cops and robbers or whatever, right? It's like you all had to figure all this stuff out on your own. So you learn some very critical thinking skills and how to socially interact and all the social cues that go along with that. Now, the millennials, like I say, they've had much more, too much constructed areas of their life in terms of in the education system, but they've had a lot of freedom still in terms of their ability to navigate on the internet. So they understand, the cyberpunks, right? The internet users that are definitely much more conducive with, I should be able to do and say what I want on here as long as I'm not causing harm to anyone. So I think, Gen Xers, and this is usually something where you skip a generation, but I actually believe historically we're in a unique situation or circumstance where you actually have two generations in a row that actually have the opportunity and ability. It doesn't mean that we're all going to function in that way or use all these tools to the best benefit for ourselves and the rest of humanity. But I do think that we're in a unique time in human history where we have two successive generations that if we put our resources, our intellect, our ambitious and our entrepreneurial zeal together, that, man, we can be a real force for liberty and completely change the paradigm entirely, where, we can challenge the authoritarian collectivists to the point where we don't have to fight them. Like, there doesn't have to come to physical battle or conflict. Just show the rest of the world or our peers or anyone that comes behind us that we've offered a whole new model, right? That you don't just exit stage left. Over here, you got freedom. Over there, it's nothing but slavery and bullshit promises and platitudes that will never be conducive with actually giving you the freedom that you actually require or need to be a flourishing human being.
So yeah, we have to take back the power of educating our kids. And I mean, just like John was saying, look at how a classroom is designed, right? It's this box. We throw a group of 20 to 50 kids in. It's a very controlled environment. They all get to learn whatever the state says the curriculum is. And, in this group of 20 to 30 people, you have kids that range from IQ, that range from house environments, some that are toxic, some that are great. And you put them in this boiling pot and you try to teach them one way. And it's not about teaching. We know now, like John said, it's about conform, control, and getting them used to routine, getting them used to job and how the government works and how it's going to be when you leave school and you work in the society. Because we've all been sitting here. We've all been kids at one point in time. And what do we understand? We learn when we're interested in things. Nobody told me to learn about politics. I liked the topic, so I self-educated myself. The same way little boys, if they like sciences, they'll eat it up if they like it. But you try and go teach that 9-year-old math, if he doesn't want to have no interest in it, it's a waste. And, you know, back in the ancient times, they understood that mentorship, right? If the boy was into metallurgy at 14, he followed his father or some friends down to the blacksmith and he learned that way. Or they listened to Aristotle talking in the town square. It was always about, well, what are you interested in, guys? Okay, well then go hang out with the guys who are doing that and learn some skills from them. And that's how schools should be structured, is feathering the kids of what they're interested at the time, giving them the mentorship, not a teacher. The teacher could just be someone who's physically doing that job at the time, whether it's aircraft repair, tech stuff, whatever you name the job. This kids should be going to the people who are working those positions, and it should be like a mentorship style. It could be still in a classroom, or it could be hands-on. We also understand, I need to go out there and do it. If I want to show how to build an engine, my father will take me to the garage. He'll show me physically how to do it. Now, you give me a book and let me read through how to take an engine apart. I'm not very good with the book stuff. I want to go out there and physically get my hands dirty. But with the classroom, very controlled environment, very set. We got people who may learn hands-on versus this, and they don't cater to anyone. So I have now realized the schooling system is one giant tool by the state to form control and to push out little soldiers to be good citizens. So it comes right back to what I said before. Until we take back the education system, until we start actually mentoring our kids, and you know, I hated this concept. Well, if your kid doesn't learn geometry or basic maths in high school, he may never learn it again. Like, you could pick up a math book in your 30s and still learn that stuff. If at some point in time you get interested in the literatures, you get interested in mathematics, let these kids learn it when they're interested in, because we know that's when it sticks to the brain. So it's just, it all comes down to education. So that's where we need to put our focus in. And I think what the media has gotten good at and what the state has gotten good at is reality TV, and news now has even become reality TV. Yeah. And the news topics are so insane. Jeffrey Epstein, COVID, terrorism, and it's just all distractions. And as the Liberty Movement, we all want to cover them for views. We want to cover them to the topics of the day. The Supreme Court thing is a big issue, and all these things are important to cover. But we get off into the weeds now, and we're not even addressing, hey, if we just educated the kids to not believe any of the clown show, we wouldn't be playing in the clown show today. So the state has gotten very good at, look over here, guys. Oh, you're starting to understand. Oh, Epstein, pedophiles, COVID, just anything they can throw at you to get you to talk about the topic of the day.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that there's more options for kids to pick a summer camp to go to than there is a classroom. I've been out for about a decade, so I don't imagine it's probably changed much, but they were paying a lot of lip service to inclusion, and that it was a bad thing to separate people by their ability and reference because all these people get behind. We had in the city I live in, we used to have a vocational high school that focused on like tangible skills, and that went away because that's, you know, people. So now they just pretend like everybody's going to go to university for every topic. I was a math and a science teacher, and you talk about, well, if you don't teach them now, when will they ever learn? Like, any young kid I've ever met has been curious, and if they learn a new thing, they're fucking excited about it. But by the time you get to high school, they're ruined. You want to talk about, if you don't learn geometry in high school, when are you going to? But we've just raised an entire group of kids to have a negative Pavlovian response to education. Like, I really enjoy reading now, but for the first 12 years of my schooling, I learned that reading was somebody picked a book for you and you had a schedule, and at the end of the chapter you had to answer questions. Like, if I had to do that now, like, you need to read this many pages by tomorrow and I've got a sheet for you to fill out, like, fuck you. I don't want to read a book. And most people don't read another book after they leave school. And like the 9th and 10th grade science classes I taught, some of those were the last hard science class that people take, and that's why they don't understand when they see something on the news now, because it's focused on, like, I have a Bachelor of Science degree and I've never had to use lots of this stuff. Like, why does anybody that's not going to be a biologist need to know what a mitochondrion does? Who cares? Like, high school science at that level is mostly just memorizing definitions and labeling diagrams. I spent a summer teaching an adult GED course, and the science content there was much more useful. Instead of just parroting back, what's the definition of this? They would give you a couple of paragraphs of information and ask you comprehension questions so that you can see something and understand it. Or they'll give you a graph of rainfall over several months, and they'll ask you which month had the highest rainfall. Just basic, I can look at a graph and I know what it means when it goes up and down. That stuff's useful, but memorizing terms isn't. And that's why, you hear, oh, vaccines cause autism. Jenny McCarthy said so, and there's no critical thinking.
John, I got to ask you something, because you're the teacher, and then I want to get everyone's opinion. We can all talk about this. This is very important now. I think it's a good segue. So as a teacher, as you've been in that environment, we all just realized, all the five of us, that the control of the education system, the control of the kids, is what the elites know is what's going to continue the whole clown show going. So what do you folks think is going to be what we're going to see down the road from all these kids now born and going to school during COVID, where they're all putting the mask, they're all not engaging with each other to face. They're all now being told by their mommies, and, you believed in Santa at 7. Can you imagine if your parents are telling you at 7, yeah, there's a virus going out there, keep your mask above your nose because you could kill grandma? Like, this is I worry about the effects of the generation down the road from all this COVID stuff right now. Yep. And I think the elite have realized it. And that's why we're seeing the mask, when we know mathematically and by the sciences, it doesn't make sense. They're like, we need the mask. This is how we get the great reset generation to adhere to communism and control.
People think video games and shit are a problem with violent kids. Take away their interpersonal skills, not seeing each other and not having that basic connection, man. I agree.
Yeah, but school is not a good place for that social. It's just locking a bunch of people that don't want to be together into a room together, and that's why there's so much bullying and fighting. It's the same thing that happens in prison and in the military. Yep. If you just lock a bunch of people together, you do need socialization for kids, but that's the main argument people use against homeschooling, is that they don't see other kids. I'm like, okay, so you want to send your kid to school so that they can get harassed and bullied by everybody? Like, put them in a sport or something. Sign them up for a club.
But that doesn't even make sense to me either, actually. That even that concept of homeschooling, that is actually a false premise, because I would suggest that not everyone's going to be conducive to do homeschooling. I would imagine in your community, the people that are much more intelligent in terms of particular fields of study. So you might not just have one parent teaching their child. That parent might take that responsibility on himself. I'm going to teach my child today. Why not bring a few other of the members of the community over here, and I'll teach them as well? So there is no such thing as this pretense that it's just going to be people isolated alone and not learn to socialize. They'll still learn to socialize. And just like Rika was acknowledging earlier on, that play, right? It's not just all work and studying. We still play, right? When you're a kid, you still play, you still socialize.
But they're not now, Dad. They're not playing. They can't. It's COVID. Right. You got to be 6 feet. That's what I mean.
And it's not just public school versus homeschooling. It's that there's no real competition for private schools. There are private schools, but the only people that have access to that are people with money. Yep. If the Canadian government would refund the $10,000-$20,000 per head that they give to the public school, if you pull your kid out and you can apply that to tuition somewhere else, I think there'd be a lot more of that come up. And if you get to decide, I'm going to send my kid to this school that operates in this way, and these are the outcomes, versus this one where my kid's going to maybe commit suicide and not learn anything, it's a pretty easy choice.
John, have you ever heard the term voucher education system? Do you know much about that?
I've heard it, and I don't think, as long as the government's involved at all, it's going to be tainted. But even a less bad version is better than what we have.
Yeah, it's at least a way of spreading tax revenue, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, basically, I think what the idea of it is they collect the taxes from the population in the jurisdiction, and then they redistribute it, and then allow the parent to choose where those funds are going. And I mean, us being staunch libertarians, obviously that's not the ideal as far as we're concerned. But myself and Alberta, we had a motion for voucher education, which it was defeated 51-49 within our conservative, their AGM. They voted on it. really close, right? And it's obviously something where that's within the Conservative Party themselves. In the larger scale, obviously, an NDPer wouldn't agree with that type of thing. But it is something that I wanted to make a point of saying it, because as far as things are today, it is a good option, a better option among bad ones, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, if we're going to have a social contract that everybody needs to give this percentage of their income and we're going to educate all of the kids, if the we're going to educate all the kids part of it would sit a little bit better with me, even if I don't have a choice in the matter, but they're not. In New Brunswick, where I'm from, there's a huge percentage of high school graduates that are still functionally illiterate. There's a shockingly high number of people that have a bachelor's degree that are functionally illiterate. They just find ways to cope. And if people come out of 12 years of school and they have no skills that they can bring to the workforce, then what was the point? I could take 12 years of university right now and come out on the other end a brain surgeon.
Right.
What did our public school system give us?
Yeah. Now, you make a lot of great points there, John. And I'm really, like I say, I'm going to reiterate this once again. I'm really glad that I brought you on, because you seem like I say, your background, and not just in terms of being a comedian, but your education and being part and parcel of that. And even the way you're articulating your thoughts here today, it's been very, very, I think I'm definitely adhering and understanding what you're saying and definitely respecting it. But I also think that the people that are watching this stream are going to be appreciative of what you're bringing to the table, because of your, like I say, the fact that you were part and parcel of the education system. And I, for one, like I say, I will just point this out here, folks. I don't like using any umbrella statements that collectivizes every person. And that's one thing I will say. There are always outliers, discrepancies, and exceptions to the rule. And just because you work for government, even for police, like I obviously rail against a lot of things that police do, these order followers. It subject a lot of people to some terrible things just by sheer fact of order following. But we always have to understand and keep in mind that there are outliers, exceptions to the case, and we need to show a lot of respect for those who do function in this system or this paradigm. I mean, even myself, right? I have family members. Matter of fact, on my mother's side of the family, most of my aunts all work for the state. But I don't necessarily think they're bad people per se for doing so, because, well, especially if you're in the healthcare field, well, where else can you practice, right? In Canada, you have no option. So if you want to help your fellow man in terms of their medical treatments or in the medical field, you have to become part of the state. So I don't naturally, try to label or attribute guilt to people just by sheer fact that they function, or get a paycheck from the state. But at the very least, you have to be willing to accept and own up to the fact there are some inherent immoralities that are the basis in some of the ways that you get your paycheck. If you're willing to accept that, then once again, we can talk about this. We can have conversations. I can alleviate your concern with the fact that I'm pointing my finger at you, because by the sheer fact that you're like, I just don't know what to do. I want to be a teacher. I have no other options or alternative other than leaving my country and everything that I know, all my family. That's the thing. Really, at the end of the day, what really needs to take place is what we're doing today. We have to sit down and talk like big boys and girls. That's all that really needs to take place. And the fact that we are the ones that are willing to do so, and our opponents, are on the collectivist side of things, are unwilling to do that. Well, at the very least, like I say, you can make your own determination of who's right or wrong, who's moral, who's more ethical, who takes the genuine legal or principled stance. I'll leave that completely up to you. I don't want to force or impose myself on anyone, but at least you have to know that if you're thinking critically about anything, is we're the ones that are willing to sit down and engage. I guarantee if you ask Jon Forward, John Hicks, my son Matt, or Ryan Penner, any one of us, we would all be willing to sit down and engage in dialogue with any of these statists or even some of these authoritarians to help break through some of the concepts or premises that they try to put forth, just to see, are they just ignorant? Are they just ill-informed, right? Or are they complacent, conformist, or not even thinking critically? Or are they authoritarians? There's so many things that we can attribute to them, but it's basically impossible to know if they're unwilling to sit down and at least engage in dialogue or debate when you talk about these very important topics of discussion, right? So that, to me, at the end of the day, is not that I would ever suggest that you just need to trust all of us and forget everyone else. It's just, at the very least, you have to acknowledge that we are willing to engage in debate and dialogue. Why? Because I'm I, just like I would imagine all the rest of these fine gentlemen, am very much confident in my premises and my understanding in terms of morals and ethics, legality, and philosophy or principles, that I'm willing to go to toe to toe. And maybe if someone tells me, that's another thing, I'm also willing to completely change my mind if someone offers a perspective or a narrative or information that's consistent enough that makes me reject some of the premises. Because that's actually the only way I've ever got to the point where I am today, is because I've been willing to reject some of the notions or premises that were jammed in my head earlier on. And was it difficult? Of course it is. Because once you've built up over years and years that you think you know something, and then somebody comes along and offers you information that makes it so that you realize that you actually didn't really know much about this topic at all, I get how difficult it is. But you know what? To be a critically thinking, independent, free human being means you have to be willing to forgo dogma and think enough and critically about these issues that you're willing to even forget and reject some of your prior premises or stances if truth and knowledge suggest that you should do so. That's where I'm at. That's where these gentlemen are at. And I guarantee they would be willing to yield and bend to your own concepts or premises if you can prove the validity and the universal or consistency in what you're expanding or explaining. That's all we're at the end of the day, is we all realize we're all going to live in this world, you know, and the only thing that's most conducive with every one of our economic and social prosperity is that we understand what each other, where we come from, what we're suggesting or insinuating in terms of our economic and social interactions, and is it consistent enough that I want to even actively engage or involve myself. So that's what we're doing. That's the importance of the messaging behind the pretense of the social contract and what it's going to mean for us going forward. Go ahead.
And it's good for us to just be a good example for people that automatically think of a libertarian as some nutcase in a tinfoil hat and a bunker. And to just not be that person, I think, is helpful. And when somebody says something that, you know, we can do all the reading and research that we can so that we do know a bit what we're talking about. But if somebody calls us on something and we don't have an answer, don't just bullshit your way through it. Say, I don't know. Yeah. Let me look into that and give it some thought. And if it's a friend of yours or something, you can come back and follow up later and be willing to give in on something if you don't have a way out.
I mean, that's,
or I don't know. Let's talk it out.
That's one of the bedrocks of libertarianism, is that I don't know what's best for you, right? So
yep.
Bingo.
Yeah, but most people would rather have a bad answer than no answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think this is a good time, Bennett, if I could come back to a comment here that somebody made. I don't know if you can pull it up, but Dave dismantled
Dave
at 12:11.
12:11. Okay.
And I'll just read it out here as you're finding it so I can buy you some time. Everyone needs to learn objective morality and what rights actually are, especially children. If you don't know your natural rights, how do you know when they are being taken? And I love that, because if we go back to, I don't know if any of you guys are from Ontario, but I followed the whole sex ed thing going on in Ontario just after Doug Ford came in. Are you sure it's
12:11, John? Sorry, buddy. I hate to disrupt you there.
Sorry, that's what I'm seeing on mine, but I'm 2 hours behind.
Okay. So it's probably
10:11 to 2:11.
2:11. And the furthest I can go back on the chat now is 2:51. It prevents me from going too far back. So sorry about that. I really. It's all good.
So what I saw during that was comments about, oh my God, if we don't teach consent as part of sex education, where will our kids learn consent? And it's like, are you fucking kidding me right now that as a parent, you haven't been teaching this to your, 30-day-year-old from the moment that it was allowed to interact with other people. And I think to bring it back to the social contract, the way to live, there we are. The way to live in the social contract properly is
311 on my side.
Perfect. Is through self-regulation and self-responsibility, controlling yourself, not controlling other people.
Yeah.
Right. So if I teach my kids to be empathetic towards other people and to sense when other people are off, they can make adjustments to themselves. They don't have to tell someone else, hey, don't do that. They can say, you know what? They don't like that. Why don't we discuss that? Why don't we talk through that? Like actual fucking adults should be doing, instead of calling bylaw and saying, Joey just made a mad comment towards Tammy and I think you should go write him a ticket. That kind of crap, right? Because the funny thing is, if we go back to COVID, like my kids are homeschooled, right? So all their friends have to go through all this crap that's going on. I live in a small town, so I know the teacher. She's pulling her hair out having to deal with all this bullshit. And at the end of the day, my kids, done school at 1:00 Monday to Thursday. They get Fridays off. And at 3:30, she's at the playground and playing with her friends on the school playground, because at 3:30, the teachers don't give a shit anymore because they're off duty. They don't have to care. And all the kids play like kids,
Most people's regular lives are, most of their day is in anarchy, where they're just making decisions and there's consequences. You don't need a law. We have a social contract to not fart in an elevator, but that doesn't need to be against the law, and it's unpleasant when it happens. But we don't need to get guns involved.
And we can go back to what Bennett said about, sorry, John, but what Bennett said about, kids growing up online. When I said something stupid as a kid, what happened to you guys when you said something stupid to the guy 3 feet away from you?
You get ridiculed,
or you get hit, or, you get pushed, we don't get that online. And I think people are missing that. If someone said that to my face, you'd get fucking smacked. And we're not getting that online, even though that violates the NAP. There's a natural training there of growing up, of learning how to deal with other people. And I think they're missing that these days in a large capacity.
Yeah, and just there's different social contracts that people have voluntarily with, I've got different rules for somebody who's going to be my friend than somebody else might have. I've got different rules within my romantic relationship that might not apply to somebody else, but we just make these decisions. I can have a social contract, and I have expectations as to how somebody's going to behave if they're going to come into my house. Mm-hmm. But you don't need to outsource that to the goons with guns to enforce that for me. You just make decisions. And I've always said the counter argument to this is, if we didn't have this stuff, then everything would devolve into chaos. But I just don't think that's the case, and we can't present our side of it like this is a utopia, and if we just eliminate government, then everything will be great. We just need to hammer down that the problems of too much freedom are better than the problems of not enough. There's no version of it with no problems.
Yep. I think Taleb says it best in his book, where he says, on a national level, I'm a libertarian. On a provincial level, I'm more conservative. On a regional level, maybe more liberal. In my community, I'm socialist, and in my house, I'm damn near communist. Right. So there's different things that we apply to different levels depending on what the direct effect to us is. And the most things I can affect are right around me. So yes, I'm willing to give more of myself to those around me, because I can affect the biggest difference there. Right.
And not at the end of the day, it all comes down to voluntary choice, though, right?
Hey,
well,
Dad,
exactly.
Can we have a little comic fun in the stream?
Go for it. John will
so
probably like that.
I got my costume. And I'm going to transform myself from Matthew into Dr. Evil. And I'm going to give you guys the big global plan here. So I got my hat to protect me. So here's what we're going to do to you serfs. We're going to give you all a vaccine, which is going to sterilize you. It's going to be great. And then when all you are sterilized, the youth, we're going to tell you that we're not going to do it to anyone under 16, because you know what? We still need a little foot soldiers under the great reset new world. We need someone to fix the robots for us. But once we, so the under 16, we're already prepping them, right? We got them in the mask. We got them scared to death from COVID. Once they get to 30, we got them. They're going to be not like you guys. But for you guys to escape, we got COVID concentration camps ready for you. But it won't matter, guys, because at the end of the day, you're not going to have any kids for the next generation. Only the ones under them who didn't take the vaccine, who have now been propagandized to wear a mask and obey their Lord and Savior, Dr. Evil. So it's all going to work out. Don't you worry. We got a camp ready for you, little freedom fighters. If you want to try and fight us, we're prepared. We've been buying up the army. We've trained the police to go along with our orders, and we've prepared for your resistance. So any of you sirs want to rebut me?
Well, I think science would say that your tinfoil hat needs to be better fit to keep the 5G hat.
Yeah, you gotta it's gotta be more pyramidal, right? So it's got to be able to reflect or deflect the rays.
You're getting all those signals bouncing off the floor and back up.
I have to get Lord Alex Jones to teach me how to make it better.
Matt, You mentioned the COVID camps, but you didn't mention the $5 billion of hotels to house homeless people going forward.
Yeah.
Oh, but that's just for temporary. We're going to get rid of them. We can't have the homeless crapping on our pretty streets. You know, us elites, we like a clean beach. We can't have any of that stuff.
So you've never been to Vancouver?
Or California.
Yeah. I'll be right back.
Yeah, go for it.
I might have to log out here. One thing I want to say,
yeah, go for it,
as
Ryan.
far as this all goes, the one positive aspect about all of this is that all these extraneous circumstances that we're dealing with around COVID is gives people like us a lot of free time to be able to sit down and have these conversations like we are. So, I mean, for all the negatives there are, I'm really grateful that I get to sit down with you guys and have these conversations. And I am going to be partaking more often. Like I said, I am starting with a media outlet here in Alberta.
Yeah,
and we'll talk some more about that. And it's the westernstandardonline.com for anyone who's interested. Awesome. And just grateful to be able to talk to you guys today and look forward to it in the future.
George,
listen, I got to say the same thing, Ryan. I'm really super appreciative of you joining us on the stream today. And I agree. I got to agree with you, man. As much, and there's definitely a lot of negative shit we got to deal with, and for sure. But yeah, for us, you know, other than to feel defeated, right? Feeling defeated just sends you want to pack your bags and go off and hide in a corner somewhere. And I don't like that idea, that mentality. And I like the way you think about things, Ryan. So yeah, and like I say, reach out to me after this one, and we'll discuss what those topics that you want to deal with, and we'll make sure we focus on that in particular. And we'll do that because 100%, I'm totally there with you, man. But like I say, I really appreciate the fact that you're bringing that positive mentality to this, because I'm right there with you. As much as I realize, man, we're up against a fucking behemoth. I mean, but you know what? One thing I've always been, as the kind of person, and my son can speak to this quite honestly, is, well, because I come from a very competitive background. My dad was a racer and stuff too, and I'm all into this. And because most of my endeavors have been personal stuff, so I'm challenging myself personally against other people. Is I like to test these kind of things, right? That's what I like to do. But the sheer fact that you're saying that you have to stay positive, the only thing that has ever benefited me, like I say, is staying willing to stay in the fight or in the competition, or willing to at least engage or interact. And that's what we have afforded to us today. As much as there are a tremendous amount of things that are definitely obstacles and barriers to the liberty that we promote and espouse, we have, at the very least, I'll admit, have the ability right now, all five of us, we're sitting here, nobody's shutting us off right now. We have the ability to say what we got to say. And as much as I like to, like everyone else, you know, attribute a lot of the fact that we're not engaging in dialogue and debate with some of our opponents, I like to, you know, I'm like everyone else, like social media is definitely having an influence and effect on that. But you know what? I'm like you. It's all about personal responsibility and accountability at the end of the day. And I firmly believe the reason why we're now having these genuine conversations, dialogues, or debates with our opponents is not because of social media. Stop blaming these fucking inanimate objects or these fucking platforms. It's like saying that the gun killed the guy, right? No, it's just a tool, folks. And what it is the people aren't using the tools afforded to them for the things that we think that should be more conducive to the human experience, and expanding on how important it is to be a free human being. Some people might be using these platforms to upload a picture of their food. You know, as much as you and I are like, what the fuck? You know, there's a lot better thing. You know, that's the thing about freedom and the live, let live mentality is you do your thing. But at the very least, we can all say with 100% certainty that as long as we still have the ability to speak freely, even if they kick us off these platforms, ultimately, that's the thing. Even if YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter bans everyone that challenges the status quo or the new paradigm, it doesn't mean that we still don't have the ability to actively engage in these kinds of dialogue, discussion, or debate. There's Minds, there's Gab. So the opportunity, the internet as it exists today, still gives us and affords us the ability to speak about these things. Just because we're only seeing a minority of people that are willing to do so, well, we can't blame the social media platforms by themselves. A lot of people are still searching and doing a whole lot of soul searching and figuring out where the hell they're at before they'll even be willing to speak out. And a lot of them may never speak out. That's why it's important for those of us who are willing to do so and step up and challenge the status quo of the establishment to take advantage of these platforms and do whatever we can. Because at the very least, life and reality is going to unfold the way it's going to unfold. But at the very least, I lay my head at night, just like I'm sure you guys lay your head at night when you go to sleep, knowing that at the very least, I'm trying my best. I'm doing my best to help educate, expand, and enlighten people in terms of some of these major philosophical concepts that has a profound effect on their social and economic life. So at the very least, we can do what we can do. It doesn't mean we're going to, be the final arbiters or determine how the outcome is going to be. It can go many ways and a multitude of ways. But at the very least, like I say, we're doing what is right as far as I'm concerned, and at least giving people something to chew on and think about. And in that area, in that situation, they should be profoundly, at least respectful and appreciative of the fact there are people at the very least that are giving them something to think about critically.
And I would like to tell Randall that I hope he has good time with building his media company. I'll make sure to have George Soros fund the Russian bots to go over there and disfranchise you. We will defeat you in the end.
We are the only independent outlet, no interest in Ottawa.
Which means you'll be easily bought off and you'll be easily taken down with the Russian bots.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I'm sure there'll be plenty of people doing their best to discredit all of us involved. And
find us in the comment section.
But yeah, I'm going to sign out here, guys. It was a pleasure speaking to you all, and I'm sure we'll speak again in the near future. And everybody take care, and best wishes to you all in 2021 over the holidays, and all of that.
Yeah, Merry Christmas and everything to you
Yeah,
too.
Merry Christmas, happy holidays.
Good to meet.
We'll talk.
I'm triggered. You should have said happy
Take care, all.
Right on. That's awesome. Yeah, I like that hat, Matt. I'm going to have to get a screen capture of that one. Anyways, did you guys anyone else want to chime in there just real quick before I like I say, there's lots of stuff that we still got to talk to, but because I made this a series, we don't have to do it all today. So we're at about an hour and 56 minutes now. I don't know about you guys, but if you want, we can even tie this up, do a last round where we can start kind of put forth our own final, words in terms of, sorry, go ahead, Matt. Was that
no, I was just going to say I did want to just kind of circle all the way back to your original post. Okay. And that was about the one, the national post where ethicists debate whether anti-mask protesters should forfeit medical care. And I just wanted to read part of it here, if I can find it again really quickly. Yeah. Because to me, the idea of the social contract is completely hypocritical. Right? Yeah. It's a contract with no words that can be changed in an instant. And right here where it says, healthcare isn't rationed for people who smoke cigarettes, but smoking is a self-harm behavior, Kaplan said. It generally hurts you, but not others. I'm pretty sure many years ago we figured the harm of secondhand smoke. Have we not?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But yet we're still covering their health care. But because I might make someone sick wandering down the road, they don't want to cover my health care if I don't wear a mask or get a vaccine. How fucking hypocritical is that?
Yeah, and the problem would be moot if we had private health care and somebody who does smoke cigarettes or whatever other bad choices would have to pay more in health insurance than anybody else. But that's not the system that we have. If we don't want to say, you're not allowed to get treatment for AIDS because you didn't wear a condom, then what's the difference?
But that's necessitated in social health care because sometimes we have to control costs.
Yeah. Well, all the problem is just one group of people having power over another group of people. If everybody was just doing their own thing, then there'd be no reason for conflict.
Exactly. And there's a video I like to throw up once in a while. It's called Don't Be a Sucker. And it was produced by the U.S. government kind of during World War II, I believe. And it's this guy standing up saying, it's the communists, it's the Japanese, and then he starts going on about Freemasons. And there's a guy in the crowd going, wait a second, he's talking about me. So how would smokers feel right now if this, take out COVID medical care and put in the word smoker or put in the word type 2 diabetic?
But smoking cases aren't on the rise like COVID. Cases are all through the roof. I mean, there's so many cases. I don't see cases of smokers. Smokers are finding out that it's unhealthy to smoke, and we're seeing smoking become less popular. But COVID is very popular, and you guys going out there and meeting up and having freedom, it goes and spread these super spreaders. So you're the problem.
If you can find a way to
see my chins, I'm making some bad decisions that you shouldn't.
If you could find a way to tax COVID, Matthew, I think you'd be on board.
Oh, that's next. We're working on the carbon tax.
The
if we
COVID
after that, we can start taxing viruses next.
The $170 a ton carbon tax? Yeah,
you get
fucking
right.
Wait till you hear the COVID
the
tax.
Vaccine, but maybe pay a fine, because how dare you get a flu and be out there potentially spreading it?
And it's not even a real question. What if you actually asked those anti-maskers, well, do you get a refund on some of your healthcare tax? Then sure, right. I'm probably not going to get it anyway.
Yeah,
well, let's talk about incentives. Let's talk about
incentives.
You'll be able to find that on your we have to protect.
Cut me a check and I'll opt out.
Don't you know we have to keep election integrity in the Middle East and Afghanistan? What is wrong with you? We need to fund these programs.
Oh, Matt, you're on a roll today, buddy. But
well, there's another Spooner quote that I think is relevant. I was reading him talking about forced consent, and he says there's no halfway house between a government depending wholly on voluntary support and one depending wholly on military compulsion. So if it's not fully voluntary, then there's no difference between a democracy and a tyranny.
Yeah. Well, let me just say, I know Matt was a bit joking about that, and I really think that was good, Matt. Good job on that, by the way. But I will just say, the one thing I will push back against that premise is, and it's a difficult subject or subject matter and topic to deal with these days, but it's called personal responsibility. Listen, this premise that I'm responsible to protect you is a fucking farce at the very least. I mean, come on, if we want to have a country full of citizens that are personally responsible, accountable, and actually have self-esteem, right? It means at the very least, minimally, you have to take care of yourself. Stop fucking, even something as simple as driving, right? As a truck driver, this is one thing that I always understood, and it's weird because it was the only time I ever heard this stuff. I was like, well, why don't they teach you this stuff when you're taking your regular license? But as a truck driver, there's a little thing they call defensive driving, where it's like, no, don't rely on everyone else doing the right thing, right? Because if you're relying on everyone else doing the right thing, you're going to be putting yourself into some precarious situation. It's called defensive driving. Just expect that there might be things that are going to happen around you that are outside your control, but just always be alert and aware, right? That's really, really important. Really good advice, not just for driving, but I would even say for life. So same goes with the whole, whether you're talking about vaccine, mask use, or all these other compulsions or mandates brought down by big government, right, or central planners, is no, you don't need to force or compel me to do something to protect someone else. What needs to take place is everybody needs to learn to be adults and take a little something called personal responsibility.
All right, that's it.
No, accountability, when they take care of themselves and stop worrying about other people doing that for them.
Listen, I'm tired of these libertarians bringing up the whole, ooh, we get to drive and we get the chance to kill people. You know what? Elon is controlled opposition. We have him in our pockets as well. We're building the self-driving cars, and as soon as they're safe enough, we will not be able to drive as well. It'll be the computer. You inhumans are incapable. You might create an accident. That'll trigger us.
I don't know what to say about that one, but you definitely trumped me there.
So I just want to throw a shout out there to Evita A.E. I will say my mother-in-law and brother-in-law both woke up during this. I keep receiving PMs from people. I received one just last week from an old coworker, over 8 years ago now. Hi, Sherry, if you're watching. And she's like, thanks for saying something, because she's in Toronto, can't speak out, and I just don't give a shit anymore. And I've had more contacts from people that say, thank you for posting stuff like this. Thank you for keep being out there and posting real stuff and not what the government is pushing. So keep on it. Keep talking. Keep posting stuff, because people are watching. There are quiet people out there that are paying attention to the stuff we're sharing.
The cracks in the facade are starting to show.
Absolutely.
And just realize that I have a big role, and we're not going nowhere, folks. You will be controlled. You will be dominated over. COVID and the social reset is just going to be birth of the new century. And once we get that in place and we sterilize you, everywhere will be North Korea. Hope you guys enjoy it.
You will be assimilated.
Yes.
There is no resistance.
No, really, I really do. Seriously, though, I really do thank you guys for bringing the lightness to it, because it's all about balance at the end of the day, folks, right? Same with the yin and yang, the whole personality, the psychology is, yes, this is a very important topic. It's subject matter that definitely requires us to be serious. But at the same time, if you go too insanely serious and crazy with this stuff, you actually enslave your own mind, right? You literally place a massive amount of burden on yourself. And that's why I really appreciate not just you, Matt, but I know John as he goes along. I know it's our first stream, John, but buddy, I know as a comedian, you're going to bring all that stuff eventually here. And I definitely hope that we're going to have much more interactions, engagements going forward. But yes, we got to find a way. And I'm not saying I'm good at it. You know, I just think that a multitude of us bringing all of our attributes to the table, we'll figure out a way. We'll figure it away. God damn it. People with resolve and are willing to engage in this stuff. It's amazing how profound we can be in our goals and what we can achieve in our endeavors if we just put the work and effort into it. And like I say, what we're doing today, you know, even I would imagine if you go back to the days of Lysander Spooner, could you imagine? Hey, let's go even further back to Lysander Spooner. Let's put some reality perspective into the equation here, folks. Could you imagine being Galileo, right? At the day, right? Going around.
He wasn't following the science.
Right?
No.
Could you imagine going around being Galileo at the end of the day and saying, oh, by the way, everyone, yeah, the earth isn't the center of the universe. It's like, fucking not only was he labeled a blasphemous and a heathen and all this shit, but hey, at the very least, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and years later, we all know that the man was absolutely correct, right? So don't be fearful. Don't shy away from controversy or speak in your mind just because there are some people today who might try to paint you or stereotype you as, like Matt was suggesting or insinuating, some tinfoil hat wearing motherfucker, right? Just speak truth as best as you know it. Don't matter. It doesn't matter. Like even me, some days I shake. Some days before I even start these streams, like, shit, am I fully prepared? Am I willing to engage in this? I don't know. But you know what? Let's just do it anyways. And I don't expect perfection. I know I'm going to falter. I'm going to fail. And sometimes in some areas in my adventures and my endeavors. But at the very least, nobody's ever going to suggest that I didn't at least stand up and speak out when it was needed and necessary. And nobody's going to be able to say the same thing about any one of us here today. And you know what? Let's do what we can. Like I say, we can do our thing and we can help the people in our immediate communities, but we can continue to expand on that by doing it in the information age where we actually have the Gutenberg press on steroids. We have the ability to access a multitude of not just households, but millions or ultimately billions of people's minds. Let's take advantage of this, because if there's one thing I know for certain, they'll never forget. Once they've watched this stuff, whether they want to agree with it or deride it, they'll never forget it. And those thoughts, those concepts, or those premises that were introduced to them, even if they might want to reject it outright initially, once they've had a little bit of time to absorb it, I guarantee if they're at least remotely resembling someone that's moral or ethical in any way, they will come around to agreeing and accepting the same kind of position we are. That is, there's no such thing as having a legitimate a force of rulers or a gang of central planning collectivists that have the authority to dictate and control every aspect of our social life. That has never been a proper premise or a concept. And like I say, just because it's happened historically for hundreds of years doesn't mean that's what's going to take place going forward. Hey, people many generations or hundreds of years or thousands or millennium ago used to believe in a lot of crazy shit. Like Matt was saying early on, people used to sacrifice their own children at the altar of some false god, right? We've advanced way beyond that point in time.
Now we sacrifice other people's children.
Right. And we've moved way far beyond that point. And I guarantee you, we as a society, we as a people, we as human beings will eventually, or at least hopefully the bulk and majority of us will move beyond these kind of mystical concepts that are in the here and now as well. That's what it is to be a progress. That's what it is to make progress. And that's one thing I think the progressives among us need to fully understand and comprehend, because what they're doing currently is regressing rather than progressing the human race and the human species.
You know, the one thing we can learn, sorry, Matt, from people like Julian Assange and Edward Snowden is everything we've ever fucking caught the government doing has started out as a conspiracy theory. So don't be afraid of that label, because that's just people trying to label you to shut you up. At the end of the day, I'm proud to be called it, because now a lot of my shit's coming true, and the people that call me conspiracy theorists are eating shit because they don't like what's going on.
All right, I'm triggered, John. Okay. We come up with conspiracy theory, the CIA, we developed that, and we don't like you going out there and telling the public our secret plan. We like to divide and conquer. I will give my final notes, and then I will go. We will release the vaccine that'll sterilize all. And then we will have the youth raised up under their mask, faceless environments, which would be great, because we don't want to see their face when they're feeding us grapes anyway on our beach when it's nice empty, after we eugenics all of you sheeple who just love being taxed to death. And then all you QAnon people out there, you're really pissing me off, because you're really starting to wake some people up. And I don't like the Q stuff. You know what? I am actually no Q. I'm friends with Q. And actually right now, I'm going to go to the bathroom and drop some Q drops of my own. So I will see you guys later. I'm triggered by this. And I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the evening.
All right, man. Good stuff, man. That's really good. Anyways, like I say, so what do you think about you guys? Do you want to deal with maybe some comments? Are we looking to tie this stream up here and maybe start again in the next one? I'm totally at you guys' mercy and how you want to do this going forward.
I'm good either way, but you might want to leave some material for your future episode.
Yeah. No, I think I definitely agree with that, because like I say, there's definitely a whole lot of stuff. Matter of fact, I brought up my little points. I always have points, make sure I can reference. I only brought it up twice in this one, so I still got lots to get to, but that's good. It's like I say, this is going to be a series at the end of the day, so we don't have to, try to tie up and summarize the entire concept of what it is to be a free human being in this first initial stream. But I will say thank you very much once again to you, Jon Forward, and to you, John Hicks. Of course, you're both amazing gentlemen, and you have the ability to articulate your thoughts very well. And I think you do it in a way that, like I say, the reason why I like having people like you on is you sound respectful. You're not using insults or derogatory statements towards people. And really, that to me, that's at the end of the day. And I'll even admit, sometimes I argue with people and say some stuff that I know isn't going to entice them to my side of things. It's just by sheer fact that they're being such idiots. I realize it's a waste of time. But the fact of why I do these videos and why you guys are willing to engage is because there are still a large portion of our population who are the fence sitters. They don't know which way to go. They're hearing stuff from so many people, from so many perspectives and so many ideologies. They don't even know how to think critically about these issues. But the way I think we presented the information pertained in this stream is not just conducive with truth and objective reality, but being presented by people that I think anyone that's watching realize that these are just regular people that are trying their best to articulate their thoughts and try to figure out how best can we navigate this world where we're respecting each other's sovereignty and individual liberty. And you know what? At the end of the day, that's all I can really expect, or anyone else of us can really expect, is the pursuit of individual liberty and freedom, and the pursuit of not just knowledge, but personal responsibility. Because that's the thing. Liberty does not exist on an island all by itself. The only way that it properly exists in any community or any geographical landmass is if you have a substantial portion of your population or your community that's conducive with having a live, let live mentality, where we only use force or violence or theft towards other people. Well, we never use theft, right? But we only use force and violence towards people as a means to retaliate against someone that's doing that against us, right? As long as we can push the narrative where that's how we have respectful dialogue and that's how we entertain each other or interact economically or socially in a proper, prosperous manner, then I think we're on the proper path. It's going to take a while. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. This is something that it might take maybe multiple generations. There might be people that will be referencing this very video, maybe 100 years in the future. I don't know. Once again, I might be pumping ourselves up a little bit too much here, but there's definitely going to be people who are going to be referenced from the knowledge that was put forth and presented by people such as us in the future. And I just want to make sure I'm doing my best to articulate my thoughts honestly, consistently, and with a universal objective message, which is let's respect each other as free, independent, sovereign human beings. Did you guys want to say anything else? Or actually, I do want to say a thing with Jon Forward. Sorry, before I tie this up. Jon Forward, I matter of fact, because you're in St. John, you're only like probably a little less than 2 hours from where I am. But if you want to post anything that you want me to share it in that in our Gmail exchange, and I'll put all the links to it. And if you're one of those people that live in New Brunswick and wants to be not just informed but entertained, I would definitely recommend maybe you check it. John, do you have any venues or outlets or anything that you have pertaining to your comedy?
There's not much going on. I run a monthly show called No Jokes Barred here in St. John, and then whatever I can get. Working on something in Woodstock next weekend, but that's still being put together. There hasn't been. We're just coming out of the orange phase of recovery because there was a whopping 70 people in St. John that were sick out of like 80,000. It's been slow going, but johnforward.com hasn't been updated in months, but it has the links to all my social media and my YouTube channel and all that stuff if you want to find me.
Yeah, well, I'm just going to bring that up there right now, and I'll give the opportunity there for John to summarize and finish up.
I do a show called St. John Forward Radio on Monday nights. It was actually on the radio, but the station's been shut down since March, so I've been doing some live streams. My most recent episode you can see there, Unfit to Exist. That's a Spooner quote, actually. Had a conversation with my Democratic friend Brian there. That 4-story walk-up is also a more I do less pontificating there. That's more of a straight comedy podcast, but check all that stuff out. Cigarettes and Cool Ranch is on my channel. That's a full hour that I recorded a little while ago.
Awesome. Well, like I said, I'm really appreciative to having you on the show today, and like
Glad
I said,
to be here.
I can entice you to come on here maybe another time or maybe a couple of times as this series unfolds, because I think that what you've contributed so far was very important, and the fact that you bring some historical context in terms of the education system, that also something that I think is really appreciative. And anyways, like I said, I'm really, really thankful for you to come on this. But anyways, same with you, John Hicks, and you already know me and John have talked in the past. I'll definitely be placing links and share some links to some of John's information. And John actually gave me that he also has a Facebook page now, not just his personal page, John Hicks, but also John Hicks as a public figure. And I'll be sharing that in a link of the description of the video as well. But is there anything else you want to summarize or sum up what you got to say in this particular stream, John?
No, not really. Just ask people to think critically about when they want to enforce rules on people, what rules they think other people would want to enforce on them. Right. Use that golden rule of government force, because at the end of the day, that's what we're talking about, right? I do have a public Facebook page. Just I haven't hit 5,000 fans yet, but it's growing crazy, and I do put more controversial stuff up there because I live in a small town. That's why I've kind of got the separate thing, but it is under my name. And John, don't be scared if I reach out, because I'm working on some virtual stuff. I think I might be able to give you some tips, or give you some content, anyways.
Sure.
Awesome. All right. Well, like I say, thanks, guys, and thanks for all the people that joined the stream. And it looked like there was quite a few people who actually were very active, engaged in the chat, and I really appreciate all you folks, because that's the thing. Some people might get, thousands and thousands of people who watch their show, but they very few or randomly or seldom actively engage themselves in the actual conversation or dialogue. And one thing I will say about the people that are usually frequenters of my channel is these are people that are not just participants or not just onlookers, but they're participants and actively willing to engage in dialogue and conversation themselves. And I really appreciate all you folks and everything you bring to the equation. And I really appreciate you folks, John, both of you, Johns, for coming and having this conversation with me today. And like I said, I'll definitely be reaching out to you both at some point in the future for further dialogue and another subsequent live stream. And like I say, for the rest of you folks, enjoy your Sunday, and just keep in mind, listen, there's lots of things that we need to discuss and debate, but the most important thing that we can do at the end of the day is make sure that we're calm, cool, collected, and consistent in our message, because the proponents, that's the one thing we're up against. Our proponents or our opponents, should I say, aren't doing that. They're not conducive with doing the right things. They're all about the short term, right? We have to be the ones that supersede that and make sure that we're not just thinking about what's beneficial for us today, but what's beneficial in the medium and the long term. And I think if we all keep that as the front and center goal, then liberty might have a chance going forward. There's no guarantee of anything, folks. That's one thing I will say in the human experiences. Nothing is guaranteed. But the one thing that we do have that is guaranteed is if we're willing to fight and defend our freedoms, if enough of us willing to do so and put aside our own differences, then I guarantee we can be an effective force against the tyrants. Because at the end of the day, I think most people respect their sovereignty and their freedom, even though a lot of people have suggested otherwise. I think at the end of the day, the human experience says that most people will do what's right for them. The difference is we got to give them the right message and the right incentive and let them understand the moral implications for the decisions they finally make. If we can do that, if we expand on these kind of informations and this kind of knowledge to enough people, then humans will progress genuinely going forward, and liberty and the values and principles of libertarianism will be something that we will all accept and adopt, or those who don't will be the ones who have to suffer that consequence, and it won't be the freedom fighters and the liberty lovers who will constantly be the ones suffering the biggest brunt or the hardships in the modern world. So thanks all you folks. Have yourself a great weekend. It's Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.